Chapter 972. Empress felt that everything was moving further and further away. The world became empty, and everything around her became unreal. It was like she was in a dream. She suddenly felt a great panic grip her heart. This was a very bad feeling. At this moment, she felt very uneasy. It wasn't that she was uneasy about the bad things that had already happened. Rather, it was because she had a premonition that something was about to happen. What had happened in court today was once again out of her control. The uneasy feeling did not come from Sun Lang's tricks, but from her father's attitude. She knew of her father's plans. 2 years ago, she had made the decision that she was willing to do some things for her father, even if it meant dirtying her own hands. As for the shock and shock from the failure of the Great Wilderness Mountain incident, it was something that both father and daughter knew and bore together. Among her father's many children, she was the only one who knew the inside story. This was clearly a unique honor. She believed that she was the only one who could inherit everything her father had: the throne, power, dignity, ambition. In order to inherit the throne, for those things, for the ambition or desire at the bottom of her heart, she had always loyally carried out her father's orders and completed the duties he had given her. She believed that her father would make her heir sooner or later. After all, she was loyal and devoted and had great power. Moreover, there were many secrets that only she and her father knew. However, not long ago, this belief had gradually begun to waver. And today, something like this had happened. She knew of her father's thoughts, including the trap he had set for Sun Lang. The martial arts examination was a delicious cake that had been dipped in poison. Her father wanted to force Sun Lang to eat it. However, things did not develop as smoothly as they had imagined. They had naturally thought about whether or not Sun Lang would see a flaw or smell danger, so they had made plans to deal with it. However, in the end, they did not understand Sun Lang well enough. This guy had used an original method to break out of the situation. He was always like this. He always launched a surprise attack from a tricky angle that the enemy did not expect. It was like this in battle. The Sky Demon knew that he was difficult to deal with, but he didn't know exactly how difficult he was. He knew that he would use one strange move after another, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not figure out which strange move the other side would use. As a result, he was always beaten very miserably. The feeling of watching his opponent stab him with a knife, but not being able to dodge, was very uncomfortable. Empress was feeling terrible right now. This was because Sun Lang had used her as a shield. Furthermore, he had rolled around and made a scene, firmly tying the two of them together. He had a rogue appearance that said, "If you don't send Empress to help me, I'll quit, and if you really can't do it, I'll resign and let her do it herself." It was really a headache because Father Emperor could not tangle with him too much. Otherwise, the matter of why did His Majesty insist on having the general preside over the military election would become a puzzle in the hearts of many court officials. However, what made Empress even more uncomfortable was her father's decision. Imperial Father agreed to Sun Lang's request and ordered him to assist him. This was an urgent matter and a decision that had to be made. Empress could understand her father's choice, but emotionally, she could not accept it because she was the person involved. For example, the military election was a dangerous trap set by the emperor to capture Sun Lang. Sun Lang sensed that danger was approaching, so he held onto the emperor's daughter and did not let go. In order to not arouse suspicion and to be able to capture Sun Lang, the emperor pretended not to know and allowed Sun Lang to hold his daughter and fall into the death trap together. Everyone had their own selfish motives and thoughts. At this time, Empress couldn't help but have this thought. Was Father Emperor planning to give up on her? She knew that after morning court, her father would certainly secretly summon her to comfort her. He would make many promises and order her to do things with peace of mind and not worry about being implicated by Sun Lang. She would help her father finish this matter and kill the national traitor. She would promise the position of heir apparent and would not go back on her words, but her heart still wavered. This was because her father had already done the same thing once. She couldn't help but worry. Would her father keep his promise? Would she be able to escape unscathed after the martial selection? After all, everything she had done so far was for the sake of ascending to the supreme position. If she died before that, then everything would be meaningless. She couldn't agree. She couldn't agree. This was the wisest choice. She could not be entangled with Sun Lang. But this was only the wisest choice, and the affairs of the world were always beyond one's control. She looked at her father, and her father was also looking at her. His eyes were warm but cold. She knew that her father's will could not be refused. She could only comply. Only now did she suddenly realize that in front of her father's will, her perseverance was like rootless duckweed. There was no room for resistance. She was the general of Tensei and the empress of the current court. She held military power and had a large number of talents under her command. Logically speaking, for a general to have this kind of power and status, their position in the court was already impregnable. With their own power and the support of the court, even the monarch had to respect this kind of power. If they hadn't taken the wrong path and attracted the attention of the court's powerful figures, there was basically no one who could easily have this kind of power and status. But she was different. She was a woman and a member of the imperial family. She was able to obtain the power and status she had today because of her own struggles, but also because of her father's support. For the sake of the throne, she had stood firmly by her father's side. Although she had obtained her father's trust and love, she had also tied her own power and power to the dignity of the Son of Heaven. This had great advantages, but also great disadvantages. The advantage was that no matter what she did, she would be blessed by the halo of the imperial family, making her invincible and unstoppable. But the disadvantages were also great. For example, if she lost her father's favor, her power and status would be fiercely shaken. She originally didn't care too much about this. She wanted to be empress, and to be empress, she naturally had to be the crown prince. If she wanted to be the crown prince, she had to win her father's favor. She had been doing this all this time, and she had done it very well. Her father had shared many of the empire's secrets with her, and her father had also sent her to carry out many of the country's military affairs. Her father had given her a great deal of power. This was both reward and trust, and she had never failed to live up to this trust. But now, everything seemed to be a little different. A nightmarish man had finally returned to the capital. Just like the nightmares of the last 2 years, with just a few casual moves, he had shaken the entire imperial court. She withdrew her gaze and glanced at Sun Lang next to her. The other party was smiling very happily, but his eyes were cold. It was the eyes of an avenger, forbearing but cruel. He waved his saber methodically, and every slash would cut the enemy's body and bring out a string of blood, but he didn't have any pleasure of hurting or torturing the enemy. It was as if these thousands of cuts were just a necessary procedure and not a way to vent his anger. Only when the enemy finally breathed his last would he reveal a satisfied smile of revenge. Her father asked, "Tensei, my daughter, what do you think?" His tone was one of inquiry, but Empress knew that he was urging her. This was not something she could refuse. Her father's plan couldn't allow any mistakes. This was the best opportunity to hunt Sun Lang. Once she refused, many things would probably become very bad. Not only would she have to face her father's thunderous fury, she would also have to face Sun Lang's attack. This guy had already calculated that no matter what the result was, he wouldn't lose out. He was someone who didn't want to lose out. Empress sighed in her heart. Ignoring the pleas of the officials behind her, she slowly clasped her hands and bowed. This son accepts the order and is willing to share the emperor's burden. At this moment, she seemed to hear her father's light and relieved sigh. Perhaps it was just an illusion. She heard Sun Lang's light laughter again. There were too many things contained in that laughter. She knew that Sun Lang had succeeded again. This was his style. This was what he did in battle. No matter what kind of tricks the other party used, he would always have his own ideas and plans. He would always be able to force the other party's tricks to accommodate his own plans. After a few rounds of confrontation, he would be able to completely take away the other party's strategy. This evil guy had once again gained the upper hand. But for some reason, this time, Empress actually didn't feel anger in her heart. Compared to anger, she had more complicated feelings. There was some melancholy, some sighing, but more than that, There was envy. People would always envy people who were in a better situation than themselves. People who didn't have money envied people who had money. People who were ugly envied people who were beautiful. People who were single envied people who had families. People who had no power envied people who had power. The reason people envied others was because others had more than they did. Originally, Empress, as a member of the imperial family and a proud daughter of heaven, had no need to envy Sun Lang, this great traitor who would be smashed to pieces at any time. But today, she finally found what Sun Lang had that she didn't and what she faintly envied. Freedom and dignity, or rather, freedom and dignity with power. The world was like this. Power made people respect. Power made people bow. For example, Sun Lang, when he entered the court and joined the game, the emperor clearly hated him to death, but he couldn't do anything about him for the time being. If it was a normal court official or general who had aroused the emperor's dissatisfaction or even hatred, the current emperor had over 100 ways to make him beg for death. But Sun Lang was different. His military achievements were outstanding, and his reputation was extremely high. It was fine if he had quietly fallen, but now that he had returned to the court, he would definitely bring back many people's memories of him. Not only did he have the support of a lackey, but he also had old allies. All of this made the emperor cautious. If he openly made trouble in the court, there would definitely be a group of court officials who would speak up for Sun Lang. After all, this empire wasn't a place where the emperor's words were absolute. Facing a powerful emperor, the officials wouldn't mind working together. And the most important thing was that Sun Lang had his biggest trump card, and that was himself. If the emperor was really determined to become hostile, he had to first completely trample Sun Lang's reputation and status into the dust and label him as a great traitor. Then, he had to convince the majority of the court officials and obtain a righteous reputation. Then, he would mobilize the army and strong people to lay down layers of nets and surround and kill him from all sides. Only like this could this matter be settled. If there was even the slightest mistake in the middle, it would be an irreversible catastrophe, just like the Great Desolate Mountain. No, it would definitely be even more serious than the Great Desolate Mountain, because Sun Lang himself was the greatest variable that threatened the stability of the country. If the emperor dared to brazenly become hostile in the court, he would have to risk the wrath of an ordinary man, and the world would be in mourning. All the court officials were present, and most of them were fierce people who had experienced the Tianyuan War. The palace guards were all part of the imperial army, and they were good at joint combat. This golden palace was a building where the strongest forces of the human race were concentrated. If the top 100 martial arts experts of the empire were ranked, then at least 30% of them were here. Even if a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal came here, he would still be beaten to death. It was really the safest place in the world. After all, the world belonged to the emperor. The emperor's talent for imperial power was the consensus of the world. The emperor needed to be protected and respected. If Sun Lang dared to openly offend the emperor in the Golden Palace, or even commit regicide, all the court officials would definitely not sit by and watch. This group of super forces that could beat a Zenith Heaven Golden Immortal to death would definitely stand in front of the emperor. But the emperor still did not dare to act rashly, because even if there were all the court officials waiting for him, he was not sure that he could escape from Sun Lang's hands. He only had one life, and if he died, he would die. Even the son of a rich family would not sit under the awning, let alone the more honorable emperor. It was simply a stupid act to offend Sun Lang when he was less than 100 steps away from him. This was the deterrence of power, the real deterrence. Even if they were already irreconcilable enemies, Empress secretly envied such power. Hutu established herself with martial arts. She was also a warrior and a warrior. Since she was a strong warrior who practiced martial arts, who did not have the dream of being invincible in the world. But no matter how powerful a warrior was, he had to bow in front of the state machine. No matter how powerful a grandmaster was, he could not resist the impact of thousands of soldiers and horses. Moreover, there was the imperial army, which was an extraordinary divine weapon. The empire's martial arts strengthened the people, and the imperial army monopolized the power and majesty of the court. It was really a wise national policy. But it was obvious that the strength and power of the empire were useless in front of Sun Lang. The empire, which possessed the strongest martial arts and violence, was actually restrained in front of one person. An ordinary man was actually able to shake the entire country with his own strength. Moreover, he relied on this to run amok in the world, causing the emperor to be unable to do anything about it. He even proudly stepped into the murderous imperial court and talked and laughed with a group of powerful enemies. How great was this freedom? Because he believed that even if the worst result was, the whole world would be buried with him. When she thought about how such an evil and terrifying monster was born in her hands, even though Empress had a mind of iron, she could not help but feel at a loss. The emperor's actions made her slightly flustered and helpless. Sun Lang's fierce and domineering threat came at her face. She was a woman, after all, and could be weak. And weakness was the beginning of many things. Weakness could change people's thoughts. Weakness could make some seeds take root and sprout. Of course, this weakness and blankness only lasted for an instant before it was replaced by determination. The most important thing in the court was to learn how to hide one's thoughts and emotions so that others could not easily see through them. But the change in that instant did not escape anyone's eyes. Sun Lang saw this change. He saw it very calmly. He had long expected this because he understood the emperor's concubine, just like how the emperor's concubine understood him. He knew that woman's temperament. That glance just now was only to confirm his guess. He knew that everything was within his control. It went very smoothly. He smiled and bowed in thanks. He appeared very happy, like a middle school student who was about to sit at the same table with the person he liked. Although he did his best to suppress it, the joy was written all over his face. But his heart was filled with cold schemes. He had once sworn that he would make this father and daughter pay a sufficient price. Revenge, of course, had to be done thoroughly. Thinking of this, he gave Empress a brilliant and warm smile. This time, Empress actually moved her gaze away as if showing weakness. Chapter 973. Since the emperor had agreed, Sun Lang had agreed, and Empress had agreed, then this matter was settled. Once the will of the emperor was protected by these two generals of the empire, the court officials had no room to object. In the end, the officials were not of one mind. They had their own interests, demands, and groups. Since they could not change it, they could only accept it and profit from it. Many friendly gazes fell on Sun Lang. Although they didn't know why Sun Lang insisted on pulling Empress to work with him, they could see the effect Sun Lang had played in this court meeting. He clearly controlled the overall situation and made the development of the matter dance with his fingertips. It could be foreseen that once the military selection smoothly concluded, Sun Lang would completely establish himself in the empire and make up for the instability of his foundation caused by his absence of 2 years. If one could not stop a person's rise, then they had to become friends with them. At the very least, they could not be enemies. This was the wisdom of politics. The emperor was somewhat depressed. Although this court meeting had basically achieved its goal, it had been disrupted by Sun Lang. The more serious consequence was that Tensei had been dragged into a quagmire. This would have some negative effects. He muttered to himself for a moment and decided to end this court meeting. First, he was somewhat dispirited. Second, he had to think of a way to appease his daughter. At this stage, Empress still had a lot of use. The court meeting is over. All officials are dismissed. The cadence of the eunuch announced the end of the morning court. The emperor said lightly, "Tensei, my daughter, stay for a moment. I have something to say to you." Many people looked at Sun Lang with meaningful gazes. The emperor's actions revealed a lot of information. In today's court meeting, the emperor wanted to give the task of presiding over the military selection to Sun Lang. Sun Lang rolled around and made a scene and dragged Empress onto the boat. Now, Shinsei and Tensei were jointly presiding over the military selection. However, the emperor had left Empress alone after the court meeting and had given the order in front of everyone. It was most likely to convey a message to the outside world. The imperial family and Sun Lang were not on the same side and would never reach a compromise or understanding. Sun Lang only smiled in response. He nodded at the officials of Tensei Province and sincerely said, "The cooperation between Shinto Province and Tensei Province in this military selection will definitely become a much-told story in the imperial court. Shinto Province is still in its infancy and lacks a lot of experience. When the time comes, I will need to learn from you. I hope you will not be stingy with your advice." The people of Tensei Province glared at him. This bastard who ate people without spitting out their bones was actually putting on an act here. This was the most hateful provocation. However, one would not hit a smiling person. Sun Lang's rank and reputation were higher than everyone else's, but he had put on a humble and sincere appearance to ask for advice. This was called respecting the wise and treating the wise with respect. If everyone ignored or even ridiculed him, it would be unruly. If it was seen by all the civil and military officials, it would be embarrassing for His Highness Empress. How infuriating! The spokesperson of Tensei Province, Wei Zheng, was very good at acting. He solemnly bowed and respectfully said, "We don't dare, we don't dare. If General Shansei needs anything, Tensei Province is willing to do its best to help." Sun Lang said happily, "Really? The people of Tensei Province are righteous." Everyone heard it, right? Android and the others clamored, "We heard it, we heard it. The people of Tensei Province are unparalleled in benevolence and righteousness. They help each other when they are in need. They are really a role model in the military. If we need anything in the future, we will definitely not hesitate to ask." F***CK, Wei Zheng and the others only want to curse. Did this bastard not know how to write the word polite? Fortunately, the officials had already left the court in order. Sun Lang did not continue to pester them. He laughed and took the lead to walk towards the door. The officials and generals of lower ranks than him were all waiting. This was the etiquette of the court. Everyone's eyes fell on him, including the 6th and 7th rank officials. They all took the opportunity to look at the appearance of the Shinsei general. After going through several court meetings, Sun Lang's name had been equated with arrogance and domineering. How should it be said? In a dynasty like the Empire, where martial arts flourished and the power of the monarch and ministers were strong, to be able to be arrogant and domineering was simply too awesome. After carefully looking at the appearance of the general, everyone's first reaction was that he was very young, very young. This was because the general did not have any hair on his mouth. In a traditionally strong imperial country like Hutu, men were considered to be stable and powerful. Growing a beard was the mainstream fashion. Because only the older generation had the ability and experience, they were worthy of trust. However, Sun Lang still maintained the habits of his previous life. He was too lazy to care about mainstream aesthetics. He didn't even want to keep his long hair. How convenient would it be to have short hair? Growing a beard was even more impossible. In this lifetime, it was impossible to grow a beard. It was unhygienic and inconvenient. Moreover, there was an even more important reason. He very considerately thought that if he grew a beard, his girlfriend might feel uncomfortable when he kissed her. Of course, he never had the chance to kiss her. However, it did not matter. Every virgin should carry condoms with them. Who knew when they would come in handy? After all, the Viscount said it well. Wait and be hopeful. In short, generally speaking, people were used to looking down on young people. The Empire also had a saying of, young people who do not have hair on their mouths are not reliable. However, in the imperial court, no one dared to look down on the general. The general was indeed so young, but it was precisely because of this that he was so terrifying. To be able to obtain such a high position despite the age discrimination, he must have done something that made everyone speechless, and the monarch had no choice but to reward him. Furthermore, he had unparalleled talent and power. This was almost unimaginable. Thinking of this, many people's eyes were filled with reverence. Humans were like this. Once you obtained enough achievements and status, the common people would automatically fill in the blanks for you. The common people were obsessed with the so-called study of success. If a person had some achievements, he or she would definitely have an extraordinary childhood extraordinary ambitions, and special skills to succeed. All of this had to be traceable because the common people would want to copy your success. They would even write an autobiography and successful experience for you. They looked at the general with respect and goodwill as he took the lead to leave the imperial court. The general left the other first-rank officials behind and took the lead. This kind of action was slightly arrogant, but considering the general's domineering aura and achievements, it seemed reasonable. The smart people began to analyze the political signal that the general's action represented. Not all of the big shots dared to openly go against the emperor. Moreover, it seemed that the chances of winning were not small. Today, the general had won the military election, so he would definitely establish his authority and status in the imperial court. Now that he was the first to leave the imperial court, it was as if he was the leader of all the officials. He must have considered this. He wanted to show everyone his strength and show off his edge to the common people. The smart people smiled knowingly. The general's plan was indeed not small at this moment. The general stepped out of the golden palace and waved at the eunuch who was guarding outside. "Where is the toilet in the palace? I want to shit." The cold wind from the extreme north instantly swept through the hearts of the officials. Eunuch Feng, who held a high position in the imperial palace and was quite famous among the foreign officials, was also stunned by this question. He had been in the palace his whole life and had been a eunuch who followed the emperor to the imperial court for 20 to 30 years. This was the first time he had encountered such a situation, the first time he had encountered such a problem. His old face immediately wrinkled into a chrysanthemum, and he said in a small voice, "Ancestor, can't you endure it and go back?" Sun Lang glared at him and said, "Bullshit, my bicycle is still parked outside. I'll ride it all the way back. The roads in the capital are not good, and it's easy to get stuck in traffic. What if it jolts out?" Eunuch Feng had always been quick-witted, but he still did not know what to do. There were many guards, eunuchs, and palace maids in the imperial palace. Thousands of people ate, drank, and went to the toilet. Naturally, there were many places for the 5 grains to be reincarnated. However, the imperial city was also divided into areas. The area with the imperial golden palace, as the core, was a public place used for court meetings. Naturally, there were no toilets because only the officials would come court. After court meetings, they would leave. Even if they wanted to go to the toilet, they had to hold it in. No official had ever made such a request. If they wanted to go to the toilet, they had to go inside the palace. But that was Sun Lang. As an old man who was favored by the emperor, Eunuch Feng knew a lot of inside information. He also understood Sun Lang's position and intentions, taking this person deeper into the imperial palace to use the toilet. This, Sun Lang urged. "Hurry up. Damn it. I'm the general of the Shunsei with a first-rank military merit." "Old man, are you plotting something? Do you want to suffocate me to death? If you die like this, I will have made a great contribution," Eunuch Feng said in a low voice. "It's indeed inconvenient in the palace. The general's martial arts are excellent. Please bear with it," Sun Lang said with a serious expression. "I'll count to 3. If you don't agree, I'll find a place to do it. When the time comes, I won't care where you poop." Eunuch Feng was shocked and said in horror, "General, it's not dignified to do that in front of so many people." Sun Lang showed a generous smile. His white teeth reflected the dazzling light of the sun. "It's okay. I'm generous and don't care about trifles. It's okay if people see me. I'll allow them to remember the way I poop in the depths of hell. The King of Hell's Book of Life and Death will also write it." "What's written? Will someone be beaten to death on a certain day in the imperial city because he witnessed the general of the Shunsei defecating everywhere?" Eunuch Feng roared in his heart. This was a serious matter, and he didn't dare to make a decision. He quickly said, "General, please wait for a moment. I'll go in and ask His Majesty. F***CK. The Emperor is in charge of everything, and he also wants to control people's poop. How petty." Sun Lang said angrily, "As a general of the imperial court, can't I even use the toilet in His Majesty's house to poop?" Eunuch Feng rushed into the palace as fast as he could and muttered something in a low voice. He then quickly came out. "General, please follow me. Thus, Sun Lang followed eunuch Feng while cursing. All the officials witnessed this scene and were all stunned. They looked at each other and didn't know what to say. It was said that extraordinary people did extraordinary things, but this was too extraordinary, wasn't it? What a wild path. Someone said in a low voice. He's too impulsive. I'm afraid he won't succeed. Nonsense, he's always been like this. What happened in the end? 2 years ago, he became the marshal of the world's armed forces and horses. Now he's still standing strong. His strength and methods are real, but his temperament is a small matter. Otherwise, how could he have defeated the sky demon? How could he have? The voice stopped here. After a short moment of shock, the court was dismissed. The officials left. Empress stayed in the Golden Palace, and the eunuchs also left. In the huge palace, only the father and daughter faced each other. I know you're scared and uneasy, and even have a grudge against me. I don't dare. Between you and me, there's no need to be so polite. Yes. The emperor slowly walked down the steps and came to Empress's side. He said indifferently, "Do you know what he went to do?" Empress lowered her head and said, "I don't know. It's definitely not something good. This monkey is a difficult opponent to deal with. I asked you to stay in front of the officials to discuss matters, but he turned around and did this to me. He really doesn't want to suffer losses. This is a show of force. He wants me to be on tenterhooks because he stayed in the imperial city. Moreover, I don't know what he's doing. Shit. Only he can think of that." General Tensei said in a low voice. "Could he be looking for?" The emperor said indifferently. "No. First, he can't find it. Second, he has his own concerns. Otherwise, he wouldn't have waited until now. With his martial arts, when will he not have a chance?" The emperor's concubine was silent. The emperor said again, "Don't worry. If he can't find it, I know what to do. Besides, there's still her." General Tensei said softly, "Father, I understand. You don't have to worry." The emperor nodded. "Compared to her, you should worry about yourself. Sun Lang may have smelled something, but he doesn't want to give up the benefits of the military selection, so he dragged you into the water. I had no choice but to make such a choice. I also understand your difficulties and uneasiness." Empress lowered her eyes and said calmly, "Thank you for your understanding, Father. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but your burden has become heavier. I'm not worried about your ability. I'm only worried about your thoughts. People's hearts change easily." Sun Lang is also a cunning and insidious person. He knows how to sow discord. He's very good at this. Sure, I want you to stay true to your heart and not be disturbed by external demons. The emperor's tone became heavier. I won't use benefits to win you over, and I won't use family to persuade you. I'll use facts to remind you. The facts are that Sun Lang and we are irreconcilable enemies. He won't let me go, and he won't let you go either. No matter what, he won't let you go, just as we won't let him go." Empress nodded. "I understand. It's best that you understand. As long as you remember this, you won't be disturbed and seduced by his insidious schemes." The emperor said, "You can rely on me, and I also want to rely on you. The best opportunity is right now. We must seize it. The crisis this country is facing, the changes this country will face in the future, everything has an opportunity to be solved. We are opening the road ahead for the empire." Speaking of this, the emperor paused for a moment and then said more seriously, "You know what to do." "Yes, I understand." The empress concubine replied, but she was a very intelligent woman. She was not a foolishly loyal person. She chose to be loyal for her own desires and ambitions, so she would think more, and she would weigh the pros and cons. So naturally, she discovered one thing. Father was talking a little too much today. Chapter 974. Feng Yongting, Eunuch Feng, was an evergreen tree in the palace. It was said that Eunuch Feng had entered the palace during the late emperor's reign. He had served the current emperor since he was a child, and it had been like a day for dozens of years. People were nostalgic. He was also talented, so he had been put in important positions. He had great power and high status in the palace. Not only were many eunuchs' ancestors respected him, but even the members of the royal family respected him. Even the foreign ministers praised him. But it was only praise. They praised him for being sensible and sincere, and praised him for not causing trouble. After all, this was a country ruled by martial arts. Everyone considered themselves fierce men, so they did not think much of eunuchs. It was a kind of physical and psychological superiority. Under these circumstances, it was impossible for eunuchs to interfere in politics. After all, the eunuch's power and arrogance came from the emperor's instigation and indulgence. When the power of the ministers was strong enough to stand up to the emperor, those deranged eunuchs who conspired to kill the loyal did not exist. Even if there were such insensible eunuchs, they would be beaten to death by the ministers. Therefore, even if the eunuchs from the Forbidden Palace were favored by the emperor, they still had to tuck their tails between their legs in front of the foreign ministers. They did things carefully and acted according to the rules. People like Wei Zhongxian and Feng Yongding were already doing well. At least when their names were mentioned, the ministers would say that these two fellows were okay. The okay eunuch Feng had a bitter face. He had stayed in the palace for dozens of years and had seen many storms. Whether it was the secret fights in the palace or the political turmoil in the court, he had smoothly passed through them all with his extraordinary wisdom and sharp intuition. But this time, he was a little panicked. He even broke out in a cold sweat. Because of one person. Because this person wanted to defecate in the palace. And he had a lot of bad habits. Madhurf Kerr, the other ministers trembled with fear during the court meeting. They did not even dare to eat in the morning. They were afraid that there would be someone who wanted to defecate and pee in the court, and it would not be easy to clean up the mess. But this guy not only had a full breakfast, he also ate 2 donkey roasted meat in front of the gate of heaven influence. Eunuch Feng took the opportunity to ask around. He seriously suspected that this was a premeditated subversion. She took him to the public toilet used by the palace servants. He thought it was too smelly and dirty, and there were people around. She brought him to a quiet and clean guest room and specially moved a clean toilet bowl to invite him to go to the toilet. The old man said that he was not used to defecating in the room, so naturally, he had to defecate in the outhouse. If it was a normal person who dared to be so picky in the imperial palace, Feng Yongting would have left long ago and left the other party to fend for themselves. However, this person was different. Eunuch Feng did not dare to do so. Although he could not imagine what would happen if he left the other party to fend for themselves in the imperial palace, he knew that no matter what happened, it would be something that Eunuch Feng's life could not bear. Helpless, Eunuch Feng could only bring General Shansei to his residence in the palace. As a eunuch with a very high status and seniority in the imperial palace, Eunuch Feng naturally lived in a separate courtyard. The imperial palace was very large. It was very easy to assign him a room of 140 square meters with 3 rooms, 2 halls, and 2 bathrooms. The environment was good, and the place was very clean. Eunuch Feng was an elegant person. He understood literature and loved calligraphy and painting. He was an intellectual among the eunuchs. He was fundamentally different from eunuchs like Wei Zhongxian and Chao Huachun, who slaughtered demons on the Tianyuan battlefield like flies. This was also reflected in the decoration style of his courtyard. It was very clean and very quiet, including the outhouse. Now, his humble outhouse was illuminated. The expensive and exquisite toilet bowl welcomed the most expensive but in the world. Eunuch Feng waited outside the outhouse. He bent his back and smiled obsequiously as he waited. Sun Lang's TSK, TSK, TSK came from inside. Particular, really particular. Eunuch Feng's toilet bowl was carved out of a natural soft moonstone. It was inlaid with gems and carved with cloud patterns. It was also covered with a brand new fine velvet cushion. The inside of the cushion was filled with precious and special fragrant wood powder. This made the toilet bowl completely odorless during use. In addition, there was a stack of white and fragrant handkerchiefs on the small table beside his hand. For the upper class, there was no need to invent toilet paper. Not far ahead, there was a small warm stove. Outside the window, there was the sound of water gurgling. It was a bamboo joint that caused the water to flow. It was not only elegant, but also could cover up the embarrassing sounds. In short, the evil feudalism was too decadent and too extravagant. standing on both sides of the Yellow River, holding confidential documents in his hand. The front line was shooting lasers, and the rear was bombarded with artillery shells. Perhaps it was because the environment was too comfortable. Sun Lang even whistled. Eunuch Feng was waiting outside anxiously. He even felt his heart beating fast. Sun Lang inside was undoubtedly a hot firecracker. Every second he stayed in the imperial palace contained a great risk. This kind of ancestor should be watched closely and sent out of the imperial palace as soon as possible. Otherwise, what should he do? Eunuch Feng sighed. What was this called? He waited outside for a few minutes, but there was no sign of the troops inside. Eunuch Feng moved his body and planned to carefully ask. Then his expression suddenly changed. Wait, no sound? In an instant, Feng Yongting felt his whole body tremble. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. He listened attentively, and his heart trembled. There was no sound, no breathing, no heartbeat. In short, there was no sound at all. It was as if there was no one inside. There was no one. Eunuch Feng was shocked and shouted, General? General? After shouting twice and getting no response, he no longer hesitated. He immediately stepped forward and pushed open the door of the toilet. General Shansei sat on the toilet bowl. His unfriendly gaze was like a knife. Before Eunuch Feng could come back to his senses and apologize, General Shin's fierce shout came with a fierce palm strike. F***ck your mother. You dare to peep at my pure and clean body. This palm strike was definitely intentional. From the strength of the palm, it was clear that it was waiting to be unleashed. Eunuch Feng had anxiously pushed open the door and entered. He had not thought to defend himself at all. Sun Lang's martial arts were much stronger than his, and it was a surprise attack. How could it not hit? Poor Eunuch Feng was hit by the palm strike and was sent flying out of the room. Fortunately, no strength was used, and there was no murderous intent. Eunuch Feng was only hit until he rolled on the ground. His face was covered in dirt, but he was not injured. He froze for a moment, then laughed bitterly and slowly stood up. In his early years in the palace, he had suffered much worse than this. It did not matter if he was hit. It did not matter if he was hit harder. This was never the main point. Eunuch Feng stood up and listened attentively. There was still no movement inside. There was no sound of breathing or heartbeat. The toilet was quiet. For what he could sense, there was no one inside. There was no sign of any living thing. Just like just now. Feng Yongting was silent for a moment, then laughed bitterly. Commander of War, I have heard the story of the boy who cried wolf. No one answered. Eunuch Feng continued. I heard no sound from the room and thought that you had sneaked into the inner palace. In shock, I pushed the door open and entered. You were sitting inside. My behavior was impolite and presumptuous. Being beaten by you is a waste of time. After I was beaten once, I began to have doubts in my heart. Because after I was beaten out of the outhouse, there was still no sound from inside. Now I am not sure. I'm not sure if you have already sneaked away or if you are still waiting here for me to come in and be beaten. He sighed. It is a good plan, but sometimes a plan cannot overcome the will of the people. General, I am the eunuch of the imperial palace. I have the responsibility of guarding the palace. Even if I am beaten to death by you, I have to make sure you are not waiting for an opportunity to leave. After he finished speaking, he walked forward and put his finger on the door of the room. Sun Lang's room rang out from inside. Crazy. Eunuch Feng smiled calmly. The only thing in this world is seriousness. Sun Lang yawned and said, Is there something wrong with your head? Why would I run around? Eunuch Feng said, There is no point in talking about this. Commander of War, we all understand in our hearts. Sun Lang said disdainfully, Understand my ass. I just want to walk around the palace. Why would I wait until now? Why would I let you create an opportunity for me? Feng Yongting muttered to himself for a moment and said, That is true. I heard that you caused a big commotion in your hometown in Summer Province and also in Tensei Province. I had no way to avoid that palm strike just now. Commander of War's martial arts are so strong that I am afraid there is no second person in the world. If you wanted to break into the Imperial Palace, you didn't have to wait until today. So why did you have to do such a thing today? Sun Lang snorted. I just wanted to take a dump, but you just had to make wild guesses, Before he could finish speaking, Eunuch Feng's eyes lit up as if he had already thought of the correct answer. He said slowly, "I understand. So the general has something to ask me." Sun Lang was speechless. Eunuch Feng continued to analyze. "The general didn't ask me directly. Instead, you've been making things difficult for me today. You even made such a joke just now. You want me to lose my composure and be at a loss. Based on your usual style of doing things, are you trying to get the answer you want from me as if nothing has happened?" Sun Lang was speechless. Eunuch Feng sighed. "This old servant has stayed in the palace for a long time, and my mouth is tightly sealed. You know this. After all, this is the Forbidden Palace. If you want to survive, keeping your mouth shut is the most important thing. The general knows this, but you still want to get information from this old servant. This means that the answer you want to know is not too important to this old servant. Then here comes the question. Is there something that the general doesn't know but wants to know? Something that I definitely know? Something that is very common?" Sun Lang was speechless. Eunuch Feng wanted to continue speaking, but he suddenly felt that something was wrong. Then he suddenly realized that Sun Lang did not seem to have said anything. Could it be? He hesitated for a moment, but still made up his mind and immediately pushed open the door of the room. This time, there was no one in the outhouse. Only the expensive toilet was placed in the middle of the room, and there was light smoke coming from the heater. Sun Lang was nowhere to be seen. F***CK. Eunuch Feng's expression changed. He stomped his feet and cursed, "This cunning brat." He wanted to turn around and chase after him, but suddenly he was kicked in the butt. He fell forward like a dog eating shit. Sun Lang's cold voice came from behind him, scolding me. I should have hung the toilet bowl above the door. Eunuch Feng lay on the ground. With Sun Lang stepping on his waist, he simply stopped struggling. Then he heard Sun Lang continue. "It's the same if you press your head in." Eunuch Feng, who was obsessed with cleanliness, was shocked. He then struggled and shouted, "Jiaying, you heartless person! If you really do that, then our friendship is over." Sun Lang snorted. "What friendship do we have? You call me commander of war and the general." Eunuch Feng laughed coldly. "It's better than having me squat in the gate of heaven influence." The two were silent for a moment. After a while, Sun Lang said, "Since you've guessed it, you should know what I want to ask, right?" Eunuch Feng sighed. "I shouldn't have said it. Also, you know that today's conversation will be relayed to His Majesty. I won't hide anything from him." Sun Lang said indifferently, "Whatever. I'm not afraid of him knowing. Anyway, from the results, things won't get worse." "The results?" Eunuch Feng said, "Back then, you didn't just look at the results." Sun Lang moved his foot away and kicked Feng Yongting. "Back then, I believed in the results." Eunuch Feng slowly stood up. "I feel sorry for this, but it's only a pity." Sun Lang continued his words. "You're the emperor's slave, the emperor's lackey. For someone who is willing to lower himself, the so-called loyalty is above everything." Eunuch Feng said calmly, "I'm not the same as Wei Zhongxian. Besides, he's only found a new master. As for me, I haven't finished repaying the previous emperor's kindness and the emperor's courtesy." Sun Lang said, "So, our friendship is over long ago." Eunuch Feng said calmly, "Yes, so it's better to call you general." Sun Lang raised his eyebrows. "I have 100 ways to make the emperor feel that our friendship is not over." Feng Yongting showed no fear. "Do as you wish. It's just death. Even if I see the previous emperor on the road to the Yellow Springs, I'll still hold my head high and have a clear conscience." Sun Lang shook his head. "Answer my question. You know, this isn't a difficult question. You can also pass it on to the emperor, and I can also get an answer from someone else." Eunuch Feng was silent for a moment. He slowly said, "In these 2 years, she's lived in seclusion, only appearing at festivals and royal celebrations. I heard that even the empress rarely sees her. Usually, she's not in the palace." Sun Lang smiled coldly. "As expected, I think she should be back soon." Hesitation appeared in Eunuch Feng's eyes. He said softly, "Sun Lang, do you have to do this?" Sun Lang said coldly, "Is there any other way to solve the problem?" Eunuch Feng had nothing to say. He sighed softly. Unfortunately, we can't be friends anymore. Sun Lang turned and said, I'm leaving. Remember to tell the emperor what happened today. Don't leave anything out. Eunuch Feng was stunned. What? Sun Lang turned and smiled slightly. If I'm not wrong, this is the emperor's plan. He knows I'll ask around. Coincidentally, this is also my plan. That's all. He floated away. Chapter 975. Sun Lang didn't stay in the Forbidden Palace, and Eunuch Feng didn't follow him out to continue monitoring him. This was probably the last bit of tacit understanding between the two. After leaving Eunuch Feng's courtyard, the Shinsei general casually grabbed a eunuch and ordered him to lead the way. Although the imperial city didn't allow random people to wander around, his first-rank military uniform was a natural pass. Even if they didn't recognize the general's face, no one dared to casually point their fingers and blindly call out to him. After passing through the 9 gates of the emperor, Sun Lang left with a relaxed expression. Before he went out, he turned his head back and glanced at the towering palace walls and the endless Forbidden Palace. Who knew how much blood and tears had been buried in this most glorious palace in the world? His greatest enemy was hiding here. The grudge that hadn't been settled 2 years ago had to come to an end eventually. How long are you going to hide? Sun Lang spat on the ground and swaggered off under the flabbergasted stares of the Forbidden Palace guards. After leaving the Gate of Heaven Influence and returning to the human world, there was a new battlefield before his eyes. Tisk. As soon as he went out, Sun Lang saw a lot of people standing across the Jinshui Bridge. Many of the officials who had left the palace hadn't left yet. Their eyes were all looking in his direction, all of them looking expectantly. He felt that this group of people was waiting for him. There was no other reason than that these officials of the imperial court had surrounded his bicycle, looking like they were waiting for him to come out. It had to be said that the appearance of these big shots of the imperial court, dressed in dignified court attire and wearing solemn expressions, surrounding a top-notch luxurious transmission bicycle made from Rue Jean, was very funny. There was a feeling of the wrong era. The scene was somewhat absurd. Thus, his thoughts began to wander. He thought of something from his previous life. He had heard someone talk about something. In 1900 AD, the Great Qing dynasty was being hung up and beaten by the Eight-Nation Alliance. However, it was in this year that Professor Max Carl Ernst Ludwig Planck opened the door to the quantum world. There was probably nothing that could compare to the absurdity of the wrong era. Then his thoughts continued to jump from my Great Qing back to my later Earth. In the past 2 years, he had been to almost every country in the West. Hutu, Ruijin, Lihua, Xinshui, and Qingmu, these 5 countries were the most powerful giants in the world. They had the largest military force, the most vast territory, and the most powerful national strength. Their status was equivalent to the 5 hooligans of the United Nations in his previous life. They undoubtedly represented the future of mankind and the future of civilization. However, this was only relative. After all, humans were evil, and countries that were controlled by a few selfish, greedy, and despicable people were naturally evil as well. The thousands of years of human history was a history of exploitation. There was no doubt about this. Everyone was a bastard, but there were also bastards who were worse and worse. For example, the current 5 major countries. From Sun Lang's perspective that transcended time, all countries had extremely fatal flaws. Putting the other 4 countries aside, he was now the general of the empire. Naturally, he had to pay attention to the affairs of his own country. According to the system, Hutu was a centralized military power, but in essence, it was an agricultural country. Based on his thousands of years of experience in the history of Chinese civilization, such a messy military power should have collapsed due to the imbalance of internal and external power, just like the Han Dynasty. However, it did not because later Earth had the Imperial Army. It was this bug-like thing that allowed the empire to monopolize the military advantage. It could ensure the dignity of the imperial court and the strength of the country under the premise of Hongwu, strengthening the people. Not only could the imperial army suppress the unruly people, but could also be used to build irrigation works and even guide water vapor to create artificial rain. It also introduced high-yield crops from the Kingdom of Greenwood, which could basically guarantee the annual harvest. In this way, the vast majority of the people would not starve to death. The knife of the imperial court was fast enough, and the country was stable because of this. The imperial army was of great significance to later Earth. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the foundation of the country. However, the success of the imperial army was also the failure of the imperial army. Once the production and maintenance of the imperial army were seriously affected, the world was not far away, especially in today's international environment where foreign enemies were like wolves. And the most awkward problem was that the most serious problem had already occurred in the production of the imperial weapons. Sun Lang was well aware of this, because he was the one who had done it. The emperor wanted to push the blame for the Wu Ju onto his head. This was also a plot that revolved around this matter. This was not hard to guess. What was more difficult to guess was the specific details, which was how the emperor wanted to operate this matter. Because the emperor had great ambitions, not only did he want to kill Sun Lang to ensure the stability of the country, but he also wanted to borrow another 500 years from the heavens. Therefore, he made a deal with the soul of the ancestor demon sword. He wanted to use this ancient alien to achieve his dream of immortality, and the process was quite inhumane. This was the most important and the core of the game between Sun Lang and the emperor. Although the two sides were irreconcilable enemies, they were somewhat cautious. The emperor was afraid that Sun Lang would directly kill him. Sun Lang was also worried about the position and situation of his relatives and friends after the outbreak of a full-scale war. They both wanted to eliminate the opponent within the existing political framework of the empire at a lower cost. For this, of course, they had to seek more help and even allies. Both sides were like this. The emperor wanted to use the operation of the military election to expose the great crime committed by Sun Lang. Sun Lang was also trying to find a way to reveal that the emperor was using the imperial army to conduct a possession experiment. Both of these were earth-shattering events that could make the whole country tremble. If the former was exposed, Sun Lang would instantly become a rat on the street. The latter was the same. When their lives were threatened, even the most loyal minister would jump up and curse the emperor. Now the emperor had thought of a way and had begun to implement it. He was the emperor and had an innate political advantage. He could calmly arrange things, but Sun Lang's side was a little more troublesome. Accusing the emperor of conducting a possession experiment with the imperial army required evidence, because this was a major event that was enough to destroy an emperor's reputation and even shake the country's reputation. It was not enough to make an accusation without evidence or just based on by Yue's death. This matter was originally very difficult. Destroying the emperor's reputation was more difficult than killing him. So far, His Majesty had not shown any flaws in this regard. This was a little passive, but there was no need to be too anxious. The respected emperor probably did not know that he, Sun Lang, held a good card from the beginning. During the Battle of the Great Bear Mountain, he was almost possessed by the devil ancestor. That dangerous battle of life and death was a spiritual attack and defense in the spiritual world. In the process of possession and counterattack, he and the devil had a brief intertwining of wills. At that moment, the two of them simultaneously understood all the secrets in the depths of each other's souls. In other words, the devil was familiar with everything that Sun Lang had seen before. And the countless skills, experience, knowledge, and secrets that the devil ancestor had accumulated through thousands of years of battles with its master were also instantly stuffed into Sun Lang's soul. That guy was really lucky to have the honor of appreciating the great ideas of Marxism-Leninism. Of course, Sun Lang was not at a disadvantage, because what the devil sword ancestor knew, he should also know. For example, a more useful production skill. So, if the conspiracy of the military election was the emperor's plan, he would certainly be pleasantly surprised. Wait a minute. Sun Lang's expression changed slightly when he thought of this. Did the emperor really not know about this? If he knew, He was afraid that the trap and conspiracy in the military election would not be so simple. So, did he know if the devil ancestor had told the emperor about this? If he chose to hide it and not report it, then this matter would become more interesting. Sun Lang was lost in thought, and his head hurt for a moment. He was actually very annoyed by this kind of intrigue. He had to fight with the emperor, empress, and the devil. Not only that, he also had to consider whether the three of them were close. If so, he had to find a way to drive a wedge between them. If not, he had to consider the hidden conspiracy behind it, which was very brain-consuming. And it was very lonely. At this moment, a shout rang out, "You're finally out. Where are you going to hide?" Sun Lang's thoughts were interrupted. He looked up and said, the chess piece is here." Bao Shiren was startled at first, and then said angrily, "I have been paid by the emperor, and I have been loyal to the emperor. I have been entrusted by the emperor, and I have been honest and upright. What chess piece? That's too unpleasant to hear." Sun Lang said the truth. "No, what I mean is you're my chess piece." Bao Shiren was even angrier. He said angrily, "What conspiracy do you have now?" Sun Lang gestured at him. Come closer. I will tell you a big secret about the emperor, the kind that you will die the next day after hearing it." Bao Shiren shouted, "Don't you dare try to drive a wedge between us." "Drive a wedge between us?" Sun Lang rolled his eyes. "I have already instigated Ku Nan to defect. Do you think I will speak nonsense? Song Hui's father has been flirting with me since the beginning. Do you think I will tell you? Di Huaying feels that the emperor is too heartless and is thinking of getting a new boss. Do you know about this?" Poor Bao Shiren was furious. "Nonsense. Flowery words. Despicable and shameless. Stop talking nonsense." Sun Lang laughed. "Why are you waiting for me? Do you have a relative who wants to take the civil service exam? So you want to bribe me, the head examiner, to leak the questions?" Bao Shiren glared at him and said, "Of course not. That's good." Sun Lang nodded and said, "You know, one of my girlfriends is a simple and hot-blooded girl. She has the dream of serving the country. It just so happens that I'm the chief examiner. I'm thinking about how to use the power in my hand for personal gain and give her the top score." Bao Shiren thought that Bao Shiren was only talking nonsense. He said coldly, "The top 3 candidates will be personally selected by the emperor. It is not up to you to decide." "I see." Sun Lang sighed. "It seems that I can only be the emperor." Bao Shiren couldn't hold back and shouted, "Sun Lang, or support someone who is more obedient." Sun Lang asked, "What do you think?" The loyal Bao Shiren couldn't communicate with this kind of traitor. He was so angry that his hair was about to explode. Looking at the situation, it seemed that he was going to fight with Sun Lang on the streets. But at this moment, 2 people rushed over from behind. One of them grabbed one of Bao Shiren's arms and dragged him back. It was Di Huaying and Song Huifu. Di Huaying sighed and said, "Junior, I already said that it would be better for me to do it. You always quarrel with the commander-in-chief, and you are so angry yourself. Why do you have to do it?" Bao Shiren struggled and said, "Senior, you don't know how infuriating this bastard is." Song Huifu let go of Bao Shiren and walked straight to Sun Lang. He greeted him woodenly, "Commander-in-chief." Sun Lang gracefully nodded in greeting. "Official Song, I trust you have been well since we last met." Then, Song Huifu turned to look at Bao Shiren with an expression that said, "You are the one who is too rude." Sun Lang also waved at Bao Shiren. One had a woodenly expressionless face, while the other had a lively expression. Both of their faces were asking for a beating. The moment he saw this scene, Bao Shiren even felt that Sun Lang's words of, "Your senior Song has been flirting with me for a long time," were not groundless. But he quickly banished this thought. Senior Song and I have known each other since we were young. We are like brothers in the same sect. How could there be such a thing? After the routine attack on Bao Shiren ended, Sun Lang asked, "What's the matter?" Song Huifu said, "Didn't you say during the morning court that we should go to Mars Sword Palace to investigate the sacred fire sword? Junior Bao wants to invite you along. After all, the sacred fire sword is in your hands. You wouldn't give it to him even if he asked. He can only ask you to go personally." Sun Lang was not surprised. "Now, the 3 of you?" Song Huifu misunderstood and thought that Sun Lang was asking about a 4th person. Senior Ko went back first. She doesn't seem to want to see you. What happened that day? Sun Lang's expression froze. What happened that day was a nightmare for Kunan. For Sun Lang, it was a sad past of hope followed by despair. He really could not bear to look back. Actually, it's nothing. I just had a little conflict with Kanan, and then I'm afraid it's more than that. Song Huefu said, every time Senior Ku Nan mentions you, she seems to be gnashing her teeth and cursing, but in the depths of her eyes, she seems to be hesitating and wavering. For some reason, she would blush like a little girl in love. What did you do? Why are you so familiar with it? Because I have a wife and a concubine, Song Huefu said. Excuse me. Sun Lang was silent for a moment. Then he glared and said, a talented young woman who returned from overseas to study in distant fire, a family full of loyal and intelligent CEO's eldest daughter, a loyal soldier with military power, a capable cousin who is gentle on the outside but strong on the inside, and, what are you talking about, General? Sun Lang shouted, my wife, my wife, my wife, my wife, my wife, my wife, and many, many wives. Song Huefu seemed to understand something. He immediately cupped his hands and said, General, you are romantic and affectionate. You are indeed a hero who is favored by beauties. You're truly a role model for men. I'm truly impressed. You are a talent, Sun Lang said. On account of you, I'll make a trip to the Mars Sword Palace today. Your senior brother D can come along as well. As for the rest of the people who are not related to him, forget about it. Bao Shiren, who had just been appeased, exploded again. Why are you excluding me? Sun Lang glanced at him. Aren't you afraid that I will anger you to death if you follow me? So you know what you are doing. Chapter 977. There were 7 sword palaces in the imperial capital. The famous 7 luminaries' sacred sword was enshrined in these 7 sword palaces. Not only that, these 7 sword palaces also housed the 7 most famous humanoid nuclear bombs in the world. The legendary 7 luminary sword sage, the most powerful warrior in the imperial army. They were the last hope of the martial artists in the world. Apart from that, each sword palace was also a sacred land for martial arts. This was because the 7 luminary sword sage was a grandmaster whose cultivation had shocked the world. After wielding the sacred sword, their battle prowess had reached the limit of the human world. Every generation of sword sage left behind a large amount of knowledge and martial arts in the sword palaces. This was the greatest treasure in the sword palaces. The imperial court used this treasure correctly. Every year, many geniuses would enter the sword palace to cultivate. They would either make contributions to the country, or they would be moldable geniuses with extraordinary talent, or they would be the descendants of outstanding generals. They would be rewarded for entering the sword palace. This was a kind of trade, and the imperial court would receive more rewards from them. Sun Lang and the others came to the Mars Sword Palace in the southern part of the capital. The layout of the sword palaces was like the number of stars in the sky. The main hall had soaring eaves and was filled with rising flames. It was in accordance with the principles of fire. Most of the martial arts manuals in the palace were aggressive like fire and full of yang energy. It was very suitable for men to cultivate, so it was very popular. Sun Lang and the others could hear the excited voices of the people from afar. Sun Lang glanced over and said with a smile, "It's so lively." Bao Shiren looked from afar and frowned. It seems that something is wrong. The gates of the sword palaces were tightly shut, and many people were gathered outside. A large number of banners were erected in the crowd, and the sound waves were like boiling flames. Excited shouts resounded through the sky. Because the voices were very loud and chaotic, it was not easy to hear clearly. In the air, there were shouts like "Reject the conspiracy," "Respect the truth," and "Down with nepotism." Obviously, they were not friendly. Bao Shiren's face darkened, and he immediately looked at Sun Lang. "You did this?" Sun Lang asked innocently. "What?" Lord Bao was already 30% suspicious, but after seeing Sun Lang's innocent look, he was even more certain of his suspicions. He said in a low voice, "I was wondering why you agreed so readily." So it was premeditated. Sun Lang looked at him from a corner of his eyes and said with dissatisfaction, I say, why are you slandering me? Why are you blaming me for everything that happens? I'm not from Wu, nor am I a witch doctor. Bao Shiren still wanted to say something, but Sun Lang had already walked forward with a curious look on his face. Stop talking nonsense. There's a demonstration in front, and they're surrounding the Sword Palace. As the mayor of the capital, how can you just sit there and watch? Shouldn't we at least figure out what happened? Bao Shiren looked at his back and gritted his teeth. We've been tricked again. You shouldn't have come. Song Huifu said leisurely. Even if you didn't come, these people would make a big deal out of it. As the capital governor, you would still have to come and ask about it. You would still be caught red-handed by Sun Lang. Bao Shiren thought about it, and it seemed to be true, so he became even angrier. If he were a woman, he wouldn't feel strange at all if he sighed and said, This is my destined evil star. After all, Sun Lang was too abominable. But there was no other way. Even if he turned around and left, Sun Lang had a way to pull him back. Because he was the capital governor, everything in the capital was within his responsibility. He could only walk forward with heavy steps. On the other side, Sun Lang had already pulled over a sturdy man who looked simple and honest, and began to interview him. Brother, what are you doing here? That thick-browed and big-eyed friend showed an angry look and said loudly, I'm here to demand an explanation from the Mars Sword Palace. Sun Lang asked a few questions, and the cause and effect of the matter gradually surfaced. The matter was actually very easy to understand. This was the Fire Sword Palace. The main purpose of the 7 sword palaces in name was to consecrate the holy swords and the residence of the sword saints. Unfortunately, the Great War of Tianyuan had caused a number of grandmasters to wither, and the invincible 7 luminary sword saints had either died or been injured, leaving a few empty spots. As the saying went, if the old didn't go, the new wouldn't come. It was also said that the holy swords made of iron were the flowing water of the sword saints. It was also said that the sword saints took turns, and the next year it would be their turn. The 2 sword saints who had died in the Great Desolate Mountain were the Water Radiant Sword Saints and the Fire Radiant Sword Saints. All the martial artists in the world were rubbing their hands together, trying to make up for this vacancy through personal struggle. These were the 7 luminaries sword saints. Not to mention fame and glory. Who could resist the temptation of being in charge of the world's strongest imperial army? But not long ago, an explosive piece of news was spread. Unknowingly, the Chaos Fire Sword already had a sword master. If this was the case, then it wouldn't be a big deal. At most, the aspiring martial artist would sigh a few times, lamenting that personal struggle couldn't compete with the progress of history. But the news of the birth of the Fire Radiant Sword Saint came at the same time as the news of his death. In other words, the Fire Radiant Sword Saint had appeared. He was about to die. Moreover, it was said that he was killed by General Shen's mouth. The rumor was very detailed and vividly described, from when Qi Lianyan flashed the holy sword on the street, bullying the heroic widow and the meritorious official of Tianyuan, to when he was angrily rebuked by Sun Lang, sweating profusely, and finally being turned into charcoal by the backlash of the holy sword. The cause and effect and the specific conversation were all recorded clearly on the big posters and picture books that were thrown everywhere. When ordinary civilians saw this, they would at most sigh a few times and say that there must be something fishy about this matter. But after the martial artists read this, they would definitely have more thoughts. This damn Fire Radiant Sword Saint was too weak. How could a weakling like this become a sword saint? In short, Qi Lianyan obviously gave people a feeling that the Fire Radiant Sword Saint was destined to be. This was very undemocratic. This was obviously big news, and the majority of the people hated this the most. CK your mother, I've been practicing hard, day and night, just for a chance to stand out. You guys, on the other hand, casually picked a person for fun. T. The Qi family's background had been turned upside down, and the relevant information about Qi Lianyan had also been thoroughly dug out. All kinds of news had been spread everywhere. A playboy, a lustful man who relied on his elder brother's prestige to fool around in his early years. This kind of guy who came from a rich family, but wasn't a plaything, was the most hated. How could this kind of bastard become a sword saint? There must be a black box operation. Think about it. The seven luminary sword saint was almost equivalent to the country's strategic deterrent weapon. He was highly respected, and his position in the hearts of the people was almost on par with the three dukes. Such an important position was actually occupied by an ignorant and incompetent playboy trash. Where did this leave the numerous martial artists who had been practicing hard? Moreover, he died so easily and in such a cowardly way. It was simply unbearable. Just like this, the simple patriotic enthusiasm of the people was immediately aroused and turned into a demonstration. How could a piece of trash like Qi Lianyan wield the sacred sword? In any case, the Mars Sword Palace couldn't get away with it. Get out here and give everyone an explanation. This was the cause of the matter. After Sun Lang finished listening, he nodded his head and sighed in admiration, looking very moved. It's really moving. The masses bravely stood up and declared war on the injustice of society. What kind of responsibility and pride is this? Yes, the people shouldn't be afraid of their government. The government should be afraid of its people. That man was indeed a simple and honest person. Hearing this, he smiled a little embarrassedly. Actually, it's not as good as he said. I just heard it from them. Sun Lang calmly interrupted him. All right, brother, don't say any more. Continue with your great cause. You must remember, you're not fighting alone. Bao Shiren had also asked another person. At this time, he walked over and looked at Sun Lang with a somewhat unfriendly expression. Someone instigated them. This is something that was premeditated long ago. As he said this, he stared at Sun Lang with a very righteous gaze, his eyes full of condemnation and doubt. This was the majestic gaze that Lord Bao had honed over the years in his judicial career. It could trigger a sense of fear and guilt in the hearts of criminals and accelerate the collapse of the target's mental defenses. Unfortunately, the other party was Sun Lang, a red-blooded, professional, and revolutionary youth of the new socialist era. Sun Lang's voice was sonorous and forceful. Nonsense. What instigation? What premeditated? Watch your words, Lord Bao. These are two negative words with a negative connotation. Do you mean that this kind of behavior should be judged guilty? May I ask what they did wrong? Lord Bao said, They gathered here and surrounded the sword palace. Sun Lang said, They just want an explanation. That's all. The imperial army is a divine weapon bestowed by the heavens. Those who are virtuous and capable will occupy it. The martial artists have trained diligently since young, regardless of winter or summer, just so that they can one day pass the imperial examination and ascend to the throne to be bestowed with the imperial army. This is the path that the imperial court promised to the people of the world. Today, there is a good-for-nothing Qi Lianyan, who is ignorant and incompetent, who can wield the sacred sword of the imperial army. This is not only a tragedy for the empire, but also a trampling on the dignity of the country. Every citizen of the empire must stand up and never back down before investigating the cause and effect. As the saying goes, the rise and fall of the world is everyone's responsibility. This fellow was quite eloquent. After all, he had fought in wars for many years and knew how to mobilize the morale of the soldiers. He also deliberately used his internal energy to shout, which quickly attracted the attention of more people. After he finished speaking, the surroundings were silent, and then thunderous cheers sounded. Good. Well said. That's right. The rise and fall of the world is everyone's responsibility. We are good men, and we will never compromise to the dark and despicable conspiracy. Coward! Amidst the cheers, Sun Lang calmly cupped his hands to the crowd, as though he was concealing his achievements and fame. Then he pushed Lord Bao forward and pointed at the crescent moon mark on his forehead. Everyone, take a look at this. Immediately, there were cries of surprise. The gate of Tying. It's Lord Bao. Although Bao Shiren wasn't dark, his face was still very recognizable. This was because the crescent moon mark on his brow was too conspicuous. The people of the world liked to talk about the supernatural, and Lord Bao Shiren was known for his unyielding character and keen observation. The crescent moon mark on his brow had also become a symbol of his authority in the netherworld. With this, Lord Bao's reputation had increased by leaps and bounds. Therefore, the people gathered in front of the palace immediately recognized the identity of the capital governor. They had been shouting with all their might earlier, but now there was a subtle hint of fear on their faces. After all, the governor was here, and he was none other than the King Yinluo of Hell, Bao Shiren. Sun Lang continued shouting. You all know Lord Bao, and you've heard of his good reputation. You've also heard of his unyielding character, and he's not afraid of authority. So what are you afraid of? You should be happy that he's here. Lord Bao is such a good official, so why would he make things difficult for everyone? Lord Bao Shiren was about to speak, but Sun Lang grabbed his arm casually and took his pulse. Thus, Bao Shiren couldn't speak and could only allow Sun Lang to continue shouting. Do you think Lord Bao will chase all of you away without any explanation? Do you think Lord Bao will punish all of you who care about the country? Do you think Lord Bao will summon the Imperial Guards to crush all of you? The crowd shouted, No, it won't. No. Sun Lang let go of Bao Shiren and nodded seriously. Of course not. If Lord Bao did these things, wouldn't it prove that he was in cahoots with Qi Lianyin? Bao Shiren glared hatefully at Sun Lang, but he couldn't do anything in public. Looking at the eager eyes around him, he could only say, Everyone, I have already received His Majesty's Imperial Edict to investigate Qi Lianyin's death. I will definitely clear up all of your doubts, find out the cause and effect of this matter, and reveal the truth to the world. Sun Lang was the first to clap his hands. Good. Then, there was a wave of cheers. Bao Shiren looked expressionlessly at Sun Lang, then said, But it's not good for everyone to gather in front of the Sword Palace and block the entrance. After all, the laws of the country are here, and this is the forbidden area of the Sword Palace, Sun Lang shouted. That's right. Why are you blocking the entrance? Why don't you go in? Hearing Bao Shiren's words, everyone's expressions changed slightly. But then, Sun Lang's words gave them an idea. So they all said at once, the Sword Palace's entrance is closed, and we're not allowed to go in. If they don't have a guilty conscience, why don't they come out? Why don't they give us an explanation? Sun Lang nodded. That's right. How can the people of the Sword Palace be so arrogant? They don't come out, and they look guilty. It looks like they have a guilty conscience. Lord Di, what do you think? Di Huaying and Song Huifu had been in the background. After all, Sun Lang's words were directed at Junior Brother Bao, and it was a wonderful thing to enjoy Junior Brother Bao's protection. Now that they were suddenly asked, they were stunned. Why the F***CK am I called? He said cautiously, This is indeed so. I see that everyone here is full of energy and has achieved a certain level of cultivation. You might even be a student of the Sword Palace. Now that you've spoken up, it's reasonable to ask questions. The manager of the Sword Palace should give us an explanation no matter what. Why don't they come out? Sun Lang shouted. They must be guilty. There must be something wrong. Lord Bao, in my opinion, please go out and call for Sword Attendant Mars to come out and give everyone an explanation. Bao Shiren was just about to refuse when he heard Sun Lang say, It's not good for everyone to keep blocking the entrance. The people inside don't open the door. We can't wait for a bolt of lightning to fall from the sky and split the door open. Hearing this, Lord Bao was shocked. He understood the subtext of this sentence. If you don't come out, I'll have to split the door open myself. If anything happens, don't blame me for not warning you in advance. Chapter 978. At this moment, someone in the Sword Palace sighed. In the absence of the Sword Master, the swordsmen guarding the palace were the actual masters of the Sword Palace. They were in charge of the daily operations of the Sword Palace and had absolute authority. The name of the Mars swordsman was Wu Hui. He had been cultivating in the Sword Palace since he was a child and was now at the age of knowing the mandate of heaven. His cultivation was profound and he was very experienced. In terms of seniority, many important officials in the court were his juniors. With such a persona, it was necessary for him to be arrogant. This was also human nature. After all, one's status changed and one's temperament changed. One had been in a high position for a long time and enjoyed the respect and worship of others, so arrogance was naturally born. Sometimes it was unavoidable to put on airs. So he was a little depressed now, because someone had jumped on his face and made him a little overwhelmed. Wu Hui couldn't help but sigh. This is not good. The person standing beside him couldn't help but say, Master, why are you sighing? It's just a bunch of useless martial artists outside. Let me lead a group of people to scare them away, and they will naturally withdraw. If it doesn't work, we can send a name card to the capital governor and ask 3 groups of Yamen runners to disperse the crowd. This is the Mars Sword Palace, an important place of martial arts in the Empire. How can we allow some second-rate Jianghu people to make noise here? Wu Hui shook his head. It's too late. It's useless. The disciple was surprised. Master, the swordsman said slowly, didn't you hear? That person is here. He sighed inwardly, feeling both depressed and regretful. If he had known, he would have. That day, when Qi Lianyan died on the street, Sun Lang immediately took control of the situation. While sending people to control the scene, he also sent people to inform the relevant departments. Apart from that, the General of Divine Strategies also gave 2 orders. He ordered Jian Zheng of the Imperial Household's Sacred Implement Supervisor and the Sword Attendant of the Mars Sword Palace to bring the relevant records to him. The messenger was Shan Xiongxin. He led a dozen cavalry through the city and in front of the Sword Palace to deliver General Shen's orders. At that time, Wu Hui snorted twice. What a joke. When I was a swordsman, you were still in your mother's womb. What do you think a swordsman is? A servant that you can summon and send away at will? If I go just because you asked me to, wouldn't that make me lose face? Who do you think I am? So he didn't go. Anyway, as the palace guard swordsman, he was outside the civil and military official system of the empire. Theoretically, he was only under the control of the emperor. Rather than calling him an official of the empire, he was more like a royal consecrator. His status was very high, and he had many disciples and juniors. Whether it was Jianghu fame or social status, he was the kind that was quite awesome. This gave him the confidence and support to refuse. What General Shun say? I'm not your soldier. Why should I listen to your orders? After all, Wu Hui had left the Heaven's Origin battlefield when he was 40 years old and was in charge of training talents. He had never heard of the commander of war, Jia Ying. It was not surprising that he did not respect her. In short, Sword Attendant Wu Hui very graciously rejected Sun Lang's request. After that, Sun Lang didn't say anything. He didn't say anything about it for several days. This made Wu Hui, who was still a little worried, completely relieved. Damn, I'm really awesome. And Sun Lang is not as terrible as the rumors say. He's just a junior. He didn't expect that trouble would come quietly today. Just as his disciple had said, the people protesting outside were just a bunch of mediocre warriors and some idlers who were here for fun. They were a mob. But the Mars Sword Palace was the holy land of martial arts in the Empire. Even if they were suppressed by the righteousness of the Empire, it was enough to make these people retreat. That should have been the case. But Sun Lang came. The General of Divine Strategies came with the capital magistrate in disguise. This meant that most of the methods to break out of the situation were completely ineffective. He put on an appearance of pleading for the people's lives. If he tried to be brave and called for an official to disperse the crowd, he would definitely be caught by the other party. Moreover, he could not use underhanded methods. Just like that, Sword Attendant Wu Hui fell into a difficult situation. The sound of someone knocking on the door came from outside. The helpless voice penetrated the heavy door with the infusion of qi and floated into the palace. Bao Shiren from Lu County requests an audience with the swordsman guarding the palace. Wu Hui was silent for a moment and slowly waved his hand. Open the door. Come with me to welcome. The heavy palace door was slowly pushed open. The Sword Palace's elite soldiers respectfully waited inside. Wu Hui calmly said, Imperial Envoy, please forgive me for not coming out to meet you. I heard that Sir Bao was entrusted by the Emperor to investigate a murder case involving the Mars Sword Palace. The Sword Palace has already made preparations and will fully cooperate with Sir Bao. Please come in for a detailed discussion. Bao Shiren's heart skipped a beat, and he thought to himself, amazing. The Taoist said that old people were shrewd. This swordsman guarding the palace was shrewd and ruthless. With just a few words, he borrowed the power of the imperial envoy and even the imperial power to define the upcoming meeting as a secret investigation commissioned by the imperial order. He would immediately be able to shut the mouths of the protesting people outside. As expected, Wu Hui continued, "Friends of the Jianghu outside, please disperse. This old man understands the doubts and dissatisfaction in everyone's hearts, and I also admire everyone's courage to plead for the sake of the empire. However, this matter concerns the secrets of the empire, and His Majesty has specially sent envoys to investigate it. Before the truth is revealed, it must be kept a secret. This is the reason why the Sword Palace has closed its doors and refused to respond. Everyone, please believe in the Sword Palace, believe in the laws of the Empire, believe in His Majesty, and believe in Lord Bao. I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer." These words were very skillful. They were watertight and neither servile nor overbearing. Not only did they give these warriors a way out, they also resolved the Sword Palace's passivity in the situation. They even cleansed themselves without leaving a trace. Cunning, cunning. Even Sun Lang didn't expect this old man to be so nimble. He couldn't help but look at Wu Hui in surprise. At the same time, Wu Hui also looked over. Their eyes met in the air. The sword attendant nodded slightly. Sun Lang smiled. This old man had some skills, but it was still the same. He knew that this sword attendant palace had his eyes on him. Before, it didn't matter how he led the tempo, but now he couldn't. If he asked any questions, Wu Hui would definitely directly expose his identity. Then, he would take the opportunity to pester him endlessly and make things difficult. But the pattern was the clothes. Today I, Galactic Player Sun Lang, will tell you how a star elf without a mouth can talk to a human. It uses spiritual energy to vibrate the air to make sounds. The omnipresent air vibrated rapidly under the pressure of the invisible sword energy, simulating human speech. This was something more advanced than ventriloquism. It was everywhere and broadcasted to the entire region. It was very suitable for stirring up trouble and scolding people. It was a godly skill that was necessary to lead the tempo. A voice that seemed both near and far sounded out of nowhere. "Dare I ask, Sword Attendant Wu Hui, your words are full of righteousness. You say things like keeping secrets and thinking about the big picture. But right is right and wrong is wrong. Black can't be changed into white, and white can't be changed into black. No matter how glib your tongue is, I only ask you to answer one question in front of everyone. Do you know Qilian? Wu Hui's expression changed slightly. He immediately looked at Sun Lang. Sun Lang pretended to look around. He had a special technique for pretending to be stupid. Wu Hui coldly snorted. Weaklings limited his imagination. He thought that Sun Lang had secretly arranged for experts to cause trouble. He couldn't help but shout, "Which expert is here? Hiding your head and showing your tail. What kind of man are you?" The voice laughed and said, "If I show up, people will remember my face. If I die mysteriously like Qi Lianyan, where will I go to cry? Swordsman Wu, do you know Qi Lianyan or not? It's such a simple question. Please explain it clearly to everyone." Wu Hui flicked his sleeves and said, "Since you don't want to show up, I won't keep you company. Master Bao, please." The voice clicked his tongue and said, "Cold, domineering, disdainful, arrogant. Your sword palace is high above us. This is how you treat us. Just like just now. If Master Bao didn't come here, I'm afraid you wouldn't open the gate for the whole day. You wouldn't even bother to explain anything to us." Wu Hui didn't reply. He invited Bao Shiren and the others into the sword palace. Since they used the banner of imperial envoys, these Jianghu people didn't dare to be too presumptuous. Although the Hudu Empire was founded on martial arts, the laws were extremely strict. They especially attached great importance to the control and guidance of martial artists. Although there was no such thing as triple the punishment for martial artists, it wasn't far off. Therefore, although they shouted loudly, they didn't dare to do anything out of line. Sword Attendant Wu Hui focused on Sun Lang. Sun Lang maintained a smile and looked very polite. The enigmatic voice that descended from the sky became even more energetic. Swordsman Wu, if you say that you have no comment, then we won't be happy. Tell me, how did a piece of trash like Qi Lianyan become the fire radiant sword saint? Thinking about it, it doesn't make sense. As a sword attendant, you're the servant of a sword saint. Your master is a piece of trash. Do you still want face? How could you let such a thing happen? I think, according to common sense, Lord Swordsman will definitely stop an incompetent person like Qi Lianyan from becoming a sword saint. This is also your duty as a palace guard swordsman. Normally, you will scrupulously abide by your duty and resolutely carry out your mission, unless, even though the door was closed, the voice still rang in his ears like a lingering ghost. Inside and outside, he could hear it clearly. Wu Hui's footsteps paused. He became a little irritable, but he knew that he couldn't show his irritation. No matter what the voice said, he couldn't lose his composure. He couldn't reveal any flaws. He didn't need to worry about anything. He just needed to do what he was supposed to do. But then the voice said, unless Qi Lianyan is your illegitimate son, right? Wu Hui was startled at first. Then, his chest filled with anger and his face turned red. Nonsense. The voice became even more cheerful. You even gave away the sacred sword and thought of a way to give your son the golden body of the 7 luminary sword saint. How great is this fatherly love? Could there be any other reason? Sword attendant Wu has so many stories when he was young. What's the deal with Qi Lianyan's background? Did you cheat on the patriarch of the Qi family, or did the patriarch cheat on you? Who should this green light be given to? Wu Hui couldn't take it anymore. He turned around and glared at Sun Lang. Sun Lang blinked and wondered, what are you looking at? Wu Hui gritted his teeth and said, make him shut up. Sun Lang was dumbfounded. What do you mean? He thought for a moment and suddenly understood. Then, anger appeared on his face. He glared and said, what do you mean? What do you mean? Do you think I arranged for someone to hide in the dark and frame you? How can you accuse me of nothing? Wu Hui said coldly, I didn't say that. Sun Lang gave tit for tat. It's best if you didn't say that. I hate it when people wrongly accuse me. What are you looking at? If you keep being so eccentric, I'll beat you up. At the same time, the voice outside lamented, what a pity. His own son called someone else father for more than 20 years and put in so much effort to make him a sword saint. Before he could teach him carefully, he encountered this tragedy of dying before his own. Not only that, but he was also exposed in the end and is about to face the court's solemn trial. Sword attendant Wu's life. TSK, you've gone too far. Wu Hui finally flew into a rage. He said loudly, very well. I've heard that the general sword techniques are divine and dominate the army. I've also learned some basic sword techniques. How about you teach me a thing or two today? Sun Lang said sincerely, let's not. It won't be good if I accidentally kill you. Wu Hui was even angrier. He shouted, as a martial artist, it won't be in vain to die under the general's divine techniques. In the blink of an eye, swords were drawn and bows were drawn. Before Bao Shiren and the others could persuade them, they heard Wu Hui shout. The sword on the waist of the Mars swordsman was unsheathed brilliantly. It happened so suddenly that the sword was out of the sheath in an instant. Even though the people present were not weak martial artists, they were still caught off guard. And there was a problem. Wu Hui, as the palace swordsman, had a profound cultivation and amazing martial arts. Sun Lang, as a famous general of Tianyuan, was even more so. Their martial arts were far superior to anyone present. Therefore, the others did not even have the chance to stop or interfere. In the blink of an eye, Swordsman Wu's sword was already rushing towards Sun Lang's throat. The speed of the sword was extremely fast, and the will of the sword was even more ruthless. After all, he was the palace swordsman, a grandmaster who had been immersed in swordsmanship for decades. In the absence of the sword sage, he was the chief teacher and the strongest martial artist in the palace swordsman. Sun Lang used his finger in place of a sword and pointed at the spine of Wu Hui's sword. The two forces collided, and Wu Hui was forced to take 2 steps back. Then, with a loud roar, he waved his sword and attacked again. The sword wind was blazing, and the wind was fierce. No one could even get close to it, let alone stop it. Whether it was Bao Shiren or Wu Hui's disciples, they were all dumbfounded. Why were they fighting? Master Bao shouted, "Mr. Wu, please stop. Sun Lang, stop." Wu Hui ignored him. The sword in his hand buzzed, and the red light flickered. Sword chi was everywhere, and his sword moves became more and more ruthless. As the palace swordsman who had been in charge of the palace swordsmen for decades, he was also a first-rate grandmaster. The sword in his hand was also an extraordinary imperial army. Now that he had become one with the sword, it was no small matter. His moves spread out like quicksilver, and for a moment he actually had the upper hand. Sun Lang dodged left and right, extremely unhappy. He cursed, "F***CKU. You asked for it." Chapter 979. In the royal palace, the empress had already left. The emperor of the empire stood alone in the vast imperial golden palace, silently looking down at the empty palace. It was completely silent. The eunuchs and guards carefully followed the strict rules of the palace, maintaining the safest distance and leaving the space for the emperor alone. A low voice that seemed to be everywhere sounded out of nowhere, reverberating back and forth in the vast palace. It was like a voice from heaven, majestic and full of power. However, even though there was only one wall between them, the guards outside did not hear any strange sounds. The voice said, "We didn't mention that matter." The emperor said indifferently, "These days, Sun Lang has repeatedly succeeded, causing me to be very passive. Sure, Er's thoughts are meticulous, so she will definitely think too much. I have to show her my strength and methods, and knock her out of her little thoughts." He did not say too much, but he still explained. Usually, the emperor did not need to explain his motives to anyone, but this time was different. He was an equal partner. The voice was neither happy nor sad, but there was a bit of sarcasm in his words. No wonder the emperor of Huda Earth calls himself a loner. You are very self-aware. The emperor was not angry. He said calmly, "There's an old saying in the imperial court, thunder and rain are the emperor's grace. It is not a flattery by a spineless minister, but a real thing. For a minister, the emperor's reward and punishment are indeed the emperor's grace." He organized his words and slowly explained. Humans were social animals, and the emperor was a loner at the top. Naturally, he would want to have friends and someone to talk to. After all, it did not feel good to keep everything in one's heart. He said, "For example, if I, as the emperor, blindly reward and favor an outstanding minister who has made many meritorious deeds, it will not be a good thing for him. Because of the infinite favor, he will easily become complacent. Even if he is cautious and upright, it will be useless because the court is full of opportunistic people. When they see that he is greatly favored by the emperor, they will definitely go up to him to flatter him and bribe him to please him. Over time, his mind will inevitably be corroded and he will become arrogant. In the long run, he will become domineering and even do things that he should not do." The emperor sighed. When the time comes, the mistake will be irreversible. He will die and his family will be wiped out, implicating his family. The root of the problem is still me. It is me who did not remind him. This is my duty. As the emperor and the emperor's father, I have a responsibility to my ministers. Very interesting words. There is not much flaw in the logic. The voice suddenly laughed. But what is the matter with Sun Lang? A cold light flashed in the emperor's eyes. He's not my subject. You also had a part to play in what happened back then. The voice was silent for a moment before saying slowly, "It is a pity for Wu Hui. He was a test subject with a high degree of completion. You gave him up just like that." The emperor said indifferently, "Wu Hui must die." Sun Lang used Qi Lianyin's death as a pretext to spread rumors. "I am very passive. As the swordsman of Mars, Wu Hui knows too many secrets. His opponent is Sun Lang, a cunning man who will stop at nothing. If he does not die, I will not be at ease." From another point of view, the emperor was indeed a loner. All the people in the world were chess pieces. He said indifferently, "But Wu Hui cannot die so casually. Otherwise, many people will think that he was killed to silence him. Moreover, Wu Hui is the swordsman of Mars Sword Palace after all. He has many disciples. If he dies suddenly, there will be trouble. Therefore, I have to design a relatively perfect way to kill him. The voice said, "The most perfect way to silence a witness is to frame your enemy for the murder." The emperor said coldly, "It is lucky that he can hold back. Qi Lianyan has been dead for so many days, but he did not go to find the swordsman of Mars Palace. Today, he finally gave himself away. He even went with Bao Shiren. This can't be better. Don't be too complacent." The voice reminded him, Sun Lang is very adaptable. Even if Wu Hui accidentally dies in his hands, it will not cause him too much trouble. It will be enough to let him get into trouble. I am not in a hurry, the emperor said coldly. As long as Wu Hui is dead, the most basic purpose will be achieved. As for how many unexpected results we can achieve, I do not care. I am the true son of heaven. I have the whole empire under my control. I have a deep foundation and a lot of capital. I can fail 100 times, but what about him? He can only afford one failure. The voice seemed to agree. Then, it shifted the focus of the discussion to the acquisition of the results of the battle. If Sun Lang uses the holy sword as we expected, it will be the perfect result. The emperor said, "The chances are very high. Wu Hui has cultivated in the Sword Palace for 40 years and has read the handwritten notes left behind by the sword saints of the past generations. His achievements in swordsmanship and martial arts are already at the level of a grandmaster. In addition, his connection with the Emperor weapon is extremely close. He can unleash 120% of the Zhu Tian Bodhisattva's power. Even Sun Lang has to be serious when facing such a grandmaster who wields an Emperor weapon. It's simply a fool's dream to think that he can win the battle barehanded." The voice said, Since it has already been activated, Wu Hui will definitely launch an attack with all his strength in a situation where he has lost his rationality. Sun Lang will definitely not expect that Wu Hui will launch a life and death battle at the slightest disagreement. He will definitely be caught off guard and will even be in a rather difficult position. It had to be said that both the voice and the emperor understood Sun Lang very well. They had deduced this plan many times. All of Sun Lang's reactions were within their calculations. With Sun Lang's martial arts, even if he is barehanded, he can take Wu Hui's life within 30 moves. However, the surprise attack this time has caused him to lose the initiative. Not only will he be forced into a passive position, he will also not be able to kill Wu Hui. Facing a Grandmaster of the Imperial Army who is like a mad tiger and unable to use his full strength, and in a situation where he is barehanded, he has to try his best to only injure his opponent and not kill him. Even Sun Lang would find it difficult to do so. The emperor took over the conversation and laughed coldly. Therefore, Sun Lang has no reason not to use weapons. What's more, Wu Hui is the palace-guarding swordsman of the Mars Sword Palace. Facing a mad dog who doesn't know what's good for him and who disrespected him before, with his personality of being in the limelight, he will naturally slap Wu Hui's old face until it swells. Then, using the sacred sword of fire to defeat Wu Hui in one move is obviously the best way to vent his anger. This was very reasonable and in line with Sun Lang's behavioral logic. You are the swordsman of Mars? You think you are very awesome? You didn't give me face before? Now you're brandishing your sword to chop me without saying anything? *T. Today I will use the sacred sword of fire to chop you up. Sun Lang was very likely to do so. The emperor and the devil ancestor both thought so. Of course, this is the best result, the voice said. When Sun Lang uses the sacred sword of fire to counterattack, Wu Hui will lose his life in an instant. The death of the swordsman of the palace is obviously a big deal. Not only will Sun Lang be stained with blood, but he may also have to hand over the sacred sword due to the situation. The sacred sword of fire has been in his hands for some time, and it's just the right time to take it back. I can also get some information from it and evaluate Sun Lang's current fighting strength. The emperor nodded. That'd better be the case. *CKU. You asked for it. At the same time, in the Mars Sword Palace, Sun Lang let out an exasperated roar. F***CK. Why did he draw his sword and chop? Did I really get it right? Of course, Sun Lang had a reason to be exasperated. F***CK. He had always been unreasonable and domineering, but today it was the other way around. Who the hell was this Wu Hui? He dared to draw his sword and chop at the slightest disagreement, and even used a killing move right away. As a civilized person who was good at reasoning and as a master of martial arts, Sun Lang expressed great indignation at Wu Hui's behavior. The other party's thunderous surprise attack had caught him off guard, and even made him feel rather embarrassed and depressed. Because Wu Hui's every move was vicious and fatal, and he couldn't smash his dog's head with one punch. Instead, he had his hands and feet tied. F***CK your mother. At this moment, Sun Lang had two choices. The first was to fight back, take down this old thing, and give him a good beating. However, this guy was a swordsman guarding the palace, so he did have some ability. The power of the Imperial Army was also very strong. He had to fight the enemy with his bare hands and ensure that he didn't kill him, which increased the difficulty of the battle. He could only equalize the situation within 20 moves, suppress the other party within 30 moves, and subdue him within 50 moves was out of the question. After all, it was much harder to capture him alive than to kill him. However, if he only wanted to end the battle as soon as possible, then he could crush the other party's skull in the 16th move. This method was obviously troublesome. It was slow to take effect and dragged on for a long time. More importantly, the fight would be ugly, and he would feel very aggrieved and helpless. After all, the feeling of being restrained was extremely unpleasant. In contrast, the second option was quick to take effect and very satisfying. It could also establish the glorious image of Uncle Sun Lang as a peerless master, and give the other party a severe physical and mental blow. Therefore, it was self-evident which choice to make. Sun Lang was really angry. When one was angry, it was easy to overlook some insignificant issues. He was caught off guard by Wu Hui's sudden attack, and was in a very sorry state. Naturally, he was incomparably angry. He was worried about the other party's life, but the other party kept pressing on without mercy. General Shunsei had never been a kind person with a generous heart. Since this was the case, what else was there to say? **TU. A dazzling red light suddenly appeared, more dazzling than the light of the Imperial Army, in Wu Hui's hands. The sun's flames surged, and lines of fire shot out. With just one move, the situation was reversed. Even though Wu Hui was the palace guard swordsman of the Mars Sword Palace, had been immersed in swordsmanship for decades, and had a first-class Imperial Army that was very compatible with his martial arts, it was useless. Martial artists were powerful because of the Imperial Army, and the Imperial Army was brilliant because of martial artists. The two complemented each other and were indispensable. Wu Hui's opponent was a peerless master whose martial arts were above his in all aspects. Now, the other party had taken out the Holy Sword, which was better than the Imperial Army in all aspects. How could he win this battle? He couldn't win. He couldn't win. As the dazzling light shone, the shadow of death hit him in the face. An unprecedented sense of crisis rose and burned from the bottom of his heart, burning Wu Hui's sixth sense. It woke him up from his chaotic and murderous thoughts. Wu Hui came back to his senses. It was as if he had a dream. In the dream, he could remember everything clearly. He could remember what he had done. Previously, that was before. Previously, he had felt anger because Sun Lang had arranged for his lackeys to secretly use sound transmission techniques to spout nonsense. Not only had they caused trouble, but they had also dared to slander him, saying that Qi Lianyan was his illegitimate son. This had to be intentional. This was the most vicious mockery and insult. How could a Shinsei general do such a despicable thing? Therefore, he was very angry. He was furious. He wanted nothing more than to kill Sun Lang. Therefore, he pulled out his sword and attacked with his sword. Moreover, he used a killing move as soon as he attacked. It was a fighting style that would not stop until one of them was dead. The sword moves, the boiling killing intent, and Sun Lang's response. He remembered everything very clearly. It was like a dream, just like a dream. But it was not a dream. It was something that happened in reality. Not only was this absurd, it also caused him to feel fear and panic. As a martial artist with a firm will, there should be nothing in this world that was worth fearing, but Wu Hui's heart of martial arts that was as firm as iron had been shaken. There is nothing more lamentable than losing one's self. He had entered the Sword Palace to cultivate since he was young, and now he was already a master of his generation. All of his cultivation had been tempered bit by bit, but he had actually lost control of his body just now. What was going on? What was going on? The sacred sword had already pierced over. Sun Lang, the sacred sword of fire. It had only been a few days since he obtained the sacred sword, but this sword move was so perfect. It was as if there was thunder in the silence. This ordinary sword move had already brought out the power of the sword of fire to the extreme. His reputation was not in vain. But Wu Hui had no time to praise this sword move. He had to make a decision to stop this inexplicable fight immediately. He could not continue fighting. Just as he was about to use his strength to break the move and speak up to ease the atmosphere, a sharp pain suddenly appeared in his mind. A strange feeling welled up in his mind. His body instantly stiffened. He felt that he had lost control of his body again, and it was even worse than before. His thoughts became sluggish, his heartbeat became chaotic, and his limbs were no longer coordinated. It was as if he had become a puppet. An incomparably clumsy puppet master had taken over and made his body a mess. This was what he was feeling now. What was even more frightening was that his consciousness was gradually blurring. His soul was shrouded in a black shadow. He felt that he was being dragged into a dark whirlpool. He could not use any strength, could not speak, and could only watch as he slid into a bottomless abyss and slowly walked towards death at this moment. The two Imperial Army forces clashed. One move determined the outcome. The difference in strength between the two was already very large. Moreover, Wu Hui had dropped the ball at the critical moment. He was sent flying with just one move, but he could not change anything. His consciousness was gradually dissipating because he had lost control of his body. It was sending a signal to his brain that he was dead. Thus, his soul was also affected. From his body to his soul, he was sliding into the abyss of death. He was about to die. The conspiracy of the Emperor and the devil was about to succeed. The important witness, Wu Hui, was dead. Sun Lang would bear the suspicion of murder. But just as his body was about to lose its vitality, the remnant power of fire on the Bodhisattva barbarian sword during the clash between the Imperial Army finally broke through the layers of barriers and was transmitted to Wu Hui's body. Something terrible happened. Chapter 980. On Earth, there was a medical device called a defibrillator. Its mechanism of action was to use electricity to treat rapid ectopic arrhythmia. For example, if the patient's heart suddenly stopped, the doctor would press two iron-like taser on the chest and send a pulse. Through strong electrical stimulation, the doctor would send a message to the heart, "Get up from your sleep," and force the heart to continue working. In addition, hardcore medic players in the Battlefield series liked to use this device to kill people. However, they were medic players after all, not magnetic infantry. The correct way to use the defibrillator was to save patients with sudden cardiac arrest. The strong electrical energy was enough to stimulate the heart to beat normally again, which was equivalent to using strong external interference to wake up the organs that had stopped functioning. Theoretically, the defibrillator could save Wu Hui. He had lost control of his body. Some mysterious and terrifying power had deceived his soul, bypassed his brain, and sent a wrong signal to his body, forcing all the major systems to stop working. The heart was the first to bear the brunt, and it was also the most fatal. If there was a strong external electrical signal to stimulate the heartbeat, then Wu Hui's life might be saved. Unfortunately, Hutu's medical, technological, and industrial level was far from enough to make a defibrillator. There were no Thunder-type Imperial Army users nearby. Even if there were, it would be useless because even Sun Lang didn't have time to notice the abnormality. No one knew what had happened. Wu Hui was almost certainly dead, And with his death, things would become very troublesome because no matter if it was Baoshirin and the others, or the martial arts disciples of the Sword Palace, there were more than 10 witnesses. Everyone saw it clearly. They all saw it with their own eyes, and they could all testify that it was Sun Lang who sent Wu Hui flying with one strike. After that, the soul of Mars' swordsman disappeared. This kind of murder was very difficult to clear. After the autopsy, the specific cause of death could not be determined. It was not far-fetched to say that the deceased was shocked to death by General Shin's powerful internal force when he was angry. After all, this kind of strange killing method could not be explained by modern medical methods, let alone in this era where medical science was not developed. It could be said that this was a perfect case of blame. But how should I put it? The affairs of the world were impermanent and unpredictable. Plans could have accidents, routines could have unforeseen changes, and news reports could have mistakes. Sometimes a flawless plot could be destroyed by an insignificant detail. This kind of thing was not something that the Emperor, the Devil, or Sun Lang could have thought of. Wu Hui's eyes widened. Wu Hui shuddered. Wu Hui trembled. Just a moment ago, his soul was about to sink into the dark whirlpool. The next moment, the blazing magma poured into the dark world. In an instant, the world was filled with light and heat. The blazing flow swept through every corner of his body like a tornado, throwing him into a crazy, shocking, throbbing, and indulgent world. He took a deep breath and opened his eyes. The motor system, the nervous system, the endocrine system, the respiratory system, the urinary system, the reproductive system, all the major systems that had been misled by the wrong signals and had gradually fallen into silence, burst forth with exuberant vitality once again, restarting their life activities with an unstoppable momentum. Spring, flowers bloomed, and all living things regained their vitality. The long, withered saplings at this moment grew strong and healthy, surging with the rhythm of life once again. Tears filled Wu Hui's eyes. He seemed to have returned to his passionate childhood. He remembered the absurd and strange dream he had when he was 13 and the cold and sticky shame between his legs when he woke up. The throbbing that had just sprouted, the infinitely beautiful future, those impulses and desires, those long-forgotten memories at this moment resurfaced in his heart. He opened his mouth wide, and thousands of emotions surfaced in his heart. The lingering fear of escaping death, the fear of almost dying, the inexplicable reason, and the incomparably strong impact. The Mars swordsman, Wu Hui, who had been sent flying by the sword and fell to the ground, suddenly twisted his body like an old salted fish and let out a puzzling cry. All the disciples were shocked. "Master!" And they all rushed over. Baoshirin was also shocked and hurriedly ran over to take a look. As for Sun Lang, after Sun Lang swung his sword to his heart's content and sent Wu Hui flying, he remembered something very, very important. He had just been enraged by Wu Hui's unreasonable attack. So, without thinking, he had raised his hand and attacked with his sword. Now that his anger had subsided, he finally regained his composure. Logically speaking, it was normal for him to forget about this matter. That was because this was very different from the situation of the Great Protection, strength. As for the latter, because it had already lasted for more than 2 years, during which many serious incidents and lessons that left a deep impression on Sun Lang. Over time, this guy had developed a conditioned reflex of avoiding women to some extent. However, the sacred sword of fire had only been in his possession for a few days, so he didn't have this kind of awareness at all. Therefore, when everyone screamed and rushed towards Wu Hui, who was lying on the ground, General Shunsei held the sacred fire sword in one hand and subconsciously stretched his other hand forward. His smile gradually disappeared, and his expression gradually collapsed. F asterisk CK. Ah! His emotions were indescribable. Even his expression was extremely complicated, to the point that his figure exuded extreme desolation. In any case, General Shansei looked as if he had lost his soul. Song Huifu calmly walked forward. He was not related to Wu Hui, nor did he have a strong sense of responsibility and love like Bao Shiren. Therefore, he did not care about the situation of the swordsman of Mars at all. Official Song came to Sun Lang's side and said in a low voice, "This is a bit too much, Admiral." Sun Lang turned his head and said, "Hmm?" Song Huifu sounded a little surprised. "You don't know?" Sun Lang glared at him. "No, what? So that's how it is. I remember now. The general went up north to join the army and spent the last 6 years on the battlefield. That's why you didn't know. That mischievous scoundrel you arranged outside is really a bit annoying. He actually said that Qi Lianyan is Wu Hui's illegitimate son. That's too insulting." Sun Lang had a very bad feeling. "What do you mean?" Song Hui's father lowered his voice and said, "A lot of people know about this, but they only spread it in secret. They don't say it out loud. This Wu Hui was very talented and accomplished a lot in his youth. Unfortunately, when he was young, he injured his meridians in a martial arts competition and became impotent. Saying that Qi Lianyan was his illegitimate son is even more vicious than cursing his ancestors and parents. No wonder he was so angry." Sun Lang was stupefied. He looked at Wu Hui, who was surrounded by the crowd, and recalled his strange cry of joy just now. His eyes were filled with tears, and it was as if he had seen an old Chinese medicine advertisement on a telephone pole. "Fuck, fuck, 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 fuck." General Shunsei shuddered as a wave of disgust washed over him. He almost wanted to turn around and leave. This was too F***king hilarious, disgusting, stupid, and ridiculous. Mother ***cur. What the F***ck? After returning to the capital, this was the first time that an idiot took the initiative to fight with him. Fight, show off, crush, and slap his face. What a good opportunity, what an interesting development. If he defeated the Mars swordsman, who had excellent kung fu, in one move and spread the news, he would be so proud. Moreover, he would be able to slap this old idiot who did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. It was obviously the first time someone had taken the initiative to fight with him, and it was obviously the first time he had shown off his martial arts in front of so many people. When these two things were combined, it was simply like a dream to slap his face. Unfortunately, why did it turn out like this? The corner of Sun Lang's mouth twitched slightly. He indifferently put away the sacred fire sword in his hand. He could not use the pretentious posture and pretentious lines that he had expected. For example, he could point the sacred fire sword in his hand at Wu Hui's throat under the gaze of the shocked and terrified Wu Hui, and use a noble and elegant posture and calm words to explain his identity to him. The one who pulled out the Mars sword was England. Bah! The one who wielded the Mars sword was the owner of the sacred fire sword recognized by the sacred fire sword. Using the identity of Mars swordsman to point his sword at the owner of the sacred fire sword was like a servant bullying his master. Such a face-slapping, pretentious scene no longer existed, because the fear and humiliation of Wu Hui being crushed in one move had been replaced by another terrible emotion. Sun Lang's heart was surging with waves. He did not even know what was going to happen next. At this moment, Song Huifu suddenly said, "Something's not right." Sun Lang subconsciously asked, "What's wrong?" Song Huifu first glanced at Sun Lang. With the sharp intuition of a famous detective, he sensed that General Shin's state of mind was in chaos at this time. Otherwise, with the general's wisdom and insight, as well as the person directly involved in the fight, there was no reason for him not to notice the other party's abnormality. Song Huifu said in a low voice, "Although Wu Hui has enough reason to be angry, it is not enough to be a reason to openly fight with you or even fight to the death. Didn't you notice anything strange when you fought with him?" Sun Lang blinked his eyes. "No, he was too weak. I couldn't tell." The pretentiousness that he missed had to be regained by others. Song Huifu was silent for a moment, and then continued. "Swordsman Wu's reaction after he was sent flying by you was also very strange. His movements, his voice, his expression, they were all very complicated," he added in his heart, "as complicated as the general's expression right now." Of course, he couldn't say this out loud. He continued, "In my early years, I stepped into the prison and convicted many criminals. I also cleared many innocent people of their wrongdoings. When they see irrefutable evidence, the tough criminals will collapse. When they see the dawn of a reversal, the innocent people will be ecstatic. Sun Lang's expression became more and more unnatural. He knew why Wu Hui was ecstatic. Song Huifu continued, Mr. Wu's ecstasy seems to have two kinds. Other than ecstasy, there is also confusion and fear. I can only understand one kind of ecstasy because I have seen this kind of ecstasy many times in the past. It is the kind of ecstasy that a disheartened criminal on death row would reveal after escaping death. Sun Lang's heart suddenly trembled. A thought flashed through his mind, and he immediately came back to his senses. In an instant, all the information that he had ignored was quickly reorganized, and he came up with new hypotheses and inferences. If the sacred fire sword didn't have that kind of power, if Wu Hui wasn't affected by that kind of power, if he had used the sacred metal sword, if he hadn't used the sacred sword, thinking of this, Sun Lang took a step forward and struck out with his right palm. An earth-shattering palm force gushed out, and a fierce gale set off a powerful shockwave. Everyone around Wu Hui was caught off guard, and all of them were pushed away by this sudden, huge force, leaving an open space for Wu Hui. Then, General Shansei hooked his pinky, and Wu Hui's right arm involuntarily lifted. The Imperial Army sword that he had been holding tightly all this time fell out of his hand and into Sun Lang's hand. The disciples of the Sword Palace were stunned at first, and then they shouted angrily, "What are you doing? Master has already been defeated, and we're not as skilled as him. There's nothing to say. Why is the general trying to steal the weapon?" The importance of weapons to martial artists was self-evident, and this was the Imperial Army. Sun Lang's actions were already a humiliation, and doing such a thing to a defeated opponent was beneath his dignity. Sun Lang couldn't be bothered to answer. He raised the sword and looked at it under the sunlight for a moment, and then he sneered, "Old thing, how does it feel to escape from death?" The moment these words were spoken, the disciples of the Sword Palace were enraged, and even Bao Shiren frowned in dissatisfaction. He was a modest gentleman, and even though Wu Hui's actions were too disrespectful, Sun Lang had won first and stolen the weapon later. Now, he was mocking him and calling him an old thing again and again. This was too ungentlemanly. Wu Hui had already been helped up by the disciples, and his face was strangely red. His expression was extremely uncomfortable, and after hearing these words, his expression changed drastically. He stared at Sun Lang and asked, "You did it?" Sun Lang raised his eyebrows and sneered, "Do I need to go through so much trouble to kill you?" Wu Hui recalled the might of Sun Lang's sacred sword that looked down on the world with disdain. Even though he couldn't control himself at that time, the dazzling sharpness and the terrifying feeling of the shadow of death enveloping his soul still lingered in his heart, causing his heart to palpitate faintly. So he had nothing to say. But if it wasn't Sun Lang who did it, the fear and helplessness of losing control of his body and his soul being slowly dragged into the abyss resurfaced in his mind. In reality, Wu Hui had already taken a trip around the gates of hell. What was with the near-death experience just now? Why did he suddenly lose control of his body? Why did his chance of survival gradually disappear? Wu Hui couldn't understand, or rather, he didn't dare to think about it. Seeing the vermilion heaven bodhisattva barbarian in Sun Lang's hand, Wu Hui's expression became extremely ugly. Shouting about killing and beating at the drop of a hat, and not even thanking me for saving your life. Taking advantage of your seniority, arrogant and conceited, it's laughable, Sun Lang said slowly. I'll return it to you. The Imperial Army turned into a stream of light, and the vermilion heaven bodhisattva barbarian stabbed in front of Wu Hui like lightning. It was the Imperial Army that he had known for decades, and it was clearly a partner that he was incomparably familiar with. But Wu Hui actually subconsciously took a step back, an inexplicable fear rising in his heart. Sun Lang said indifferently, "Everyone witnessed with their own eyes that it was the swordsman of Mars who unreasonably attacked me. It's truly infuriating and regrettable that such a thing happened. I think there's no need to continue today's visit, so I'll come another day. Mr. Wu, farewell." After saying that, he turned and left. Looking at his back, Wu Hui panicked and subconsciously shouted, "General, please wait." Chapter 981. Sun Lang turned around with a faint smile on his face. "What else do you want?" Although he said that, Shinsei had already made up his mind. "If you want me to cure his impotence, then I will King kick this old bastard in the balls." Clearly, he was overthinking things. Although the Mars swordsman who had been impotent all year round had just grasped the realm of great harmony of Wei Tian's magic wand, he did not associate such a change to Sun Lang. Naturally, he had a deeper reason for calling out to Sun Lang. After all, staying alive was more important. But even so, as a respected grandmaster of the Empire, his thoughts had not yet turned. He was not willing to lower his head and admit defeat to Sun Lang. After all, he had never admitted defeat in the past 20 years, so he did not have the relevant experience. At this moment, he could only shyly say, "This old man loves martial arts as much as my life. I took the liberty to test you just now, and to be defeated, I am very happy. The general is an expert in martial arts. This old man accepts his defeat wholeheartedly." As he spoke, he gradually entered the zone, and his acting skills slowly improved. Unknowingly, tears filled his eyes as he sighed emotionally. The general's sword was like a blazing fire, blazing with fire, and has already reached the 10th level of the sacred sword of fire. Even if the previous sword masters were reborn, they would not be able to reach this level. This old man is very relieved to have such a sword master. The Mars Sword Palace is willing to serve the general as our master and follow your orders. Finally, he bowed and said, "This is not the place to talk. Sword Master, please follow this old man inside." What he said was quite impressive. First, he saved some face for himself and forcefully explained the abnormality from before. He explained that the surprise attack was due to his love for martial arts, and that it was a test and examination by the sword masters. Then, he flattered Sun Lang in a roundabout way, secretly begged for mercy, and finally threw out the proof of his allegiance. It is natural for the sword masters to be loyal to their sword masters. "Big brother, just nod your head, and Mars Sword Palace will follow your footsteps from now on." Of course, since he was the big brother, then the big brother has the obligation to protect his little brother when his little brother is in danger. Sun Lang heard this and smiled. Wu Hui also smiled, but it was more of an apologetic smile. Only the two of them knew the subtext and deeper meaning of his words. To the onlookers, this turn of events was too confusing. They had just been fighting to the death, and now they suddenly wanted to acknowledge someone as their big brother. Was this the way of thinking of a peerless expert? But the next moment, Sun Lang stopped smiling. "I accept your apology, and I won't hold you responsible for the attempted assassination. After all, I respect the old and cherish the young, and I'm kind-hearted. I won't stoop to the level of a dying man. As for drinking tea, you don't have to. Mr. Wu, you're pressed for time." These words were too impolite, and in the ears of the crowd who didn't know the truth, it was like an aggressive death threat. The disciples of the Sword Palace immediately became indignant and began to clamor. "All of you shut up!" Wu Huixian shouted loudly. After everyone had calmed down, he looked at Sun Lang and said, "Funeral? This old man is only in his early 50s. My body is healthy, and I have quite a bit of cultivation. How could—" Sun Lang sneered. "What are you pretending for? You were almost killed just now. The murderer is the one you're thinking of. Believe it or not, goodbye. You don't have to see me off." He turned and left, and Wu Hui broke out in a cold sweat. As a martial artist, he was not afraid of death. What he was afraid of was not death, but the way of death. It was that kind of fear. Just now, he had lost control of his body. His soul was separated from his body, and he was slowly sliding into the abyss. The body he had, the martial arts he had painstakingly practiced, his life, and his fate were suddenly out of his control. It was as if there was a pair of terrifying eyes watching him and a pair of terrifying hands that could control him at any time. It could control him to do things that he wouldn't do. It could seize his thoughts, control his body, and manipulate his fate. There was nothing more terrifying than losing oneself. He was just like a pitiful walking corpse. It was simply too terrifying. If all of this was as he guessed, Wu Hui shivered violently. When he came back to his senses, Sun Lang was already striding toward the gate of the Sword Palace. The Mars swordsman didn't have time to think anymore. Ignoring his loss of composure and embarrassment, he suddenly rushed forward and grabbed Sun Lang's arm, begging, "General, save me. General, please save this old man's life." Sun Lang's right arm shook, shaking off the old man's hand. He looked at the other party and said indifferently, "Save you? Is there a reason why I must save you?" Wu Hui anxiously said, "I am the Mars swordsman. I have been in charge of the Sword Palace for several decades. I have many disciples and old friends who are willing to be the general's lackeys." "Lackeys?" Sun Lang smiled. "You'll bite whoever I tell you to?" Although it hurt his pride to be called a lackey, Wu Hui was truly frightened. He didn't care about any humiliation and nodded repeatedly. Yes, if the general wants me to bite anyone, I'll—" His words came to an abrupt end. The Mars swordsman's face turned deathly pale. His eyes revealed a look of shock because Sun Lang's smile was filled with cold, killing intent. The other party's eyes projected an abyss, a bottomless terror. "Bite who? Who should he bite?" Sun Lang slowly said, "It seems you've understood. Old man, you're not stupid. I have many talented people under my command, and there are countless strong people. What does a palace swordsman like you count as? But an old dog like you does have a great use, because when you bite a specific person, your bite will be especially painful." Wu Hui could feel his thighs trembling nonstop. As the palace guard swordsman, he was famous throughout the imperial capital. His cultivation was outstanding, and his swordsmanship was renowned throughout the world. With his lower body's martial arts, even if he stood on a sharp awl, he would be very stable. His legs would never tremble. But now, his legs were trembling because of fear. He knew what Sun Lang was talking about. He knew who Sun Lang wanted him to bite. But did he dare? "You seem to understand, but you don't seem to dare. Since you don't dare, why should I save you?" Sun Lang calmly said, "Since you want to be loyal to the Emperor, it's better to make arrangements for your funeral as soon as possible." Wu Hui's lips trembled, his legs trembling. Shock and struggle intertwined in his eyes. But in the end, he couldn't say anything. Although he had once joined the army and fought against the Sky Demon, that was more than 20 years ago. At that time, the War of Tianyuan was in a stalemate. The Empire was bitterly holding on under the attacks of the Sky Demon. Before the battle, they began to consider defeat and focused on defense instead of offense. As time went on, the style of the soldiers of that generation leaned toward caution, conservatism, obedience, and even compromise. Wu Hui joined the army in that era and retired. He then returned to the imperial capital and returned to the Sword Palace to cultivate. Until the end of the war, he didn't even take half a step out of the imperial capital. Therefore, he didn't have the determination to fight to the death, nor did he have the drive to be number one in the world. In comparison, the generals and generals who were active at the end of the War of Tianyuan and experienced the final stages of the War of Tianyuan, from the all-out counterattack to the destruction of the Sky Demon, were much more unrestrained. They were strong, domineering, and driven. Especially the soldiers who had been under the control of Sun Lang. They usually had the confidence and momentum of, "I'm so awesome that I can beat everything." If Wu Hui's experience had happened to Android and the others today, they would have probably slammed the table and cursed. Yes, at that time, Sun Lang really didn't have good intentions. As a Chinese who grew up listening to the stories of the War of Resistance against Japan, when the army was mentioned, he would naturally think of the iron-like, highly organized, and legendary army. When he led the troops to manage the army and enforce military discipline, he would unconsciously draw closer to the Red Army in his mind. However, Sun Lang just did the opposite. Out of his deep malice toward the Hodo Empire, he often secretly taught some rebellious generals the Japanese army's red deer spirit of subduing their superiors. In the past, when Sun Lang was in charge of them, it was fine. But once these rebellious guys had a superior who couldn't control the situation, They would make all kinds of trouble and cause trouble without permission. Therefore, this Wu Hui still needed ideological and political education. He said, "That's all. Take care of yourself. If you think it through before you die, you can come to me for help. Be careful not to get killed on the way." This was the tragedy of being a chess piece. Life and death were not in one's own hands. The chess player had no mercy. Playing chess was really a game of chess. The superior planned things. For the chess player, the living people who could cry and laugh, happy and sad, and have families and lives, were just cold chess pieces in the chess box. They all looked the same and had the same use. They could be placed wherever they wanted. If they were eaten, the chess player would only feel angry and dissatisfied, but would not pity the chess pieces that died miserably. Do you feel pity for the black and white people who were surrounded and killed, and the carriages, horses, soldiers, and cannons that were eaten? Not at all. For Sun Lang, if Wu Hui was willing to be a mad dog that bit the emperor, it would be a good move for him to save him. If he was unwilling, then there was no need to save him. If he was unwilling, then this chess piece would be used for another purpose. Wu Hui was not willing to die like this, but he also did not have the courage to be a small pawn that charged and broke through enemy lines. He did his best to demonstrate his value to Sun Lang, hoping that he would change his mind. "General, please reconsider. If I die, you will also be suspected." Sun Lang calmly said, "Suspicion is just suspicion. In broad daylight, there will naturally be upright officials who hate evil to the core to bring justice to me. Isn't that right, Sir Bao?" Wu Hui turned his head and saw Bao Shiren hurrying over. The governor's face was full of hesitation. "What were you talking about?" Sun Lang had just used his internal energy to create a barrier to dissolve the sound waves and construct a soundproof barrier. Bao Shiren and the others were quite far away. They could only see the incessantly pleading Wu Hui and the calm and collected Sun Lang, but they could not hear anything. General Shan Se leisurely said, "Wu Hui's life is at stake. He is begging me to save him." Bao Shiren was shocked. "What's going on?" Wu Hui's expression was bitter, but he did not dare to speak directly. Sun Lang was right beside him, so he did not dare to speak without permission. Sun Lang calmly said, "Ask him for help. If he agrees, I will save your old life." Hearing this, the Mars swordsman gritted his teeth. He did not care about seniority and status, bowing deeply. "I beg Sir Bao to save me. I will never forget your kindness if I say a few good words in front of General Bao." Bao Haizi was a good child. He was well-educated and well-mannered, unlike Sun Lang, who was impudent and lawless. Seeing this respected swordsman bow so deeply, he panicked and immediately went to help him up. "Senior, there is no need to be so courteous. How can this junior be so courteous? But what is going on?" Although he was simple and honest, he was not stupid. He did not agree immediately. While Wu Hui was hesitating on how to explain, Sun Lang slowly said, "Tell him the truth." Hearing this, the Mars swordsman actually trembled. He was a powerful martial artist and was famous throughout the imperial capital, yet he was scared to this extent. One did not know whether to laugh at his cowardice or sigh at the cruelty of imperial power. General Shin's tone was Sunran. "Let me tell you one more thing. You should have died just now, but for some reason, the assassin's plot failed. He must be feeling very awkward and passive right now, and he must be anxious to stop his losses. If I offer him an olive branch now, he will definitely not mind compromising a little. When the time comes, the two of us will beat you into a traitor who committed suicide for fear of punishment. Not only will you die quietly, but even your family and reputation will be destroyed." He raised his eyebrows. "So, is it difficult to just let you tell Sir Bao the situation?" Sir Bao was secretly shocked. He realized that he might have run into something big, or even heard something incredible, something that he did not want to face. He even wanted to turn around and leave. Sun Lang saw through his feelings and only said, "It's too late to run now. I have already reminded you not to get involved in this matter, so that you won't be in a dilemma later. Did you think that when I said dilemma, it was between me and the Emperor?" Bao Shiren clenched his teeth. Sun Lang's eyes flashed with a mocking light. "Old man, I don't have time to waste with you. You're forced into a corner, but you don't even dare to jump up and take a bite. Even eunuchs are braver than you. Wu Hui's depression and madness were ignited by this sentence. He was controlled, manipulated, and played. His life and death were in the hands of others. He could not control his own body. He was silenced, abandoned, and used. He was not born a wretch. He could also be angry and frustrated. He was already doomed to die. Did he not dare to fight for it? He clenched his fists, took a deep breath, and roared at Bao Shiren with all his strength. Sir Bao, please understand. It is His Majesty who wants to kill me. With a boom, this roar was like a thunderclap, shaking Bao Shiren's mind. His pupils suddenly constricted, and a look of horror appeared on his face. Sun Lang controlled the sound waves so that only the three of them could hear Wu Hui's angry roar. There had to be a way to advance and retreat. For example, when using troops, one could not blindly pursue an attack. Today, Wu Hui had lost control of his emotions and roared at the sky. Even if the surrounding people could hear him, the audience would only be a group of Jianghu martial artists outside and a few disciples of the Sword Palace. It was useless for them to hear him. This was because the key factor that determined whether the throne was stable or not was not the rumors and opinions of the people, but the attitude of the officials in court. At least for now, he only needed to let Bao Shiren hear him. Chapter 982. A long time ago, Bao Shiren had been stubbornly avoiding a fact. This was a moral dilemma that all upright ministers had to face since ancient times. They might have great ambitions, they might be unyielding and indomitable, but the more noble their personality was, the more outstanding they would be, and the more they would have to face the interrogation of right and wrong in their hearts. It was because their talents and status allowed them to see more of the truth and the essence of history. They knew that the world was actually full of suffering. Throughout the ages, for thousands of years, the masses had never been truly satisfied. War had killed countless people, famine had killed countless people, and plague had killed countless people. For 99% of the people in this world, they were born into this world and were destined to suffer. The so-called romance, the so-called peace, and the so-called peace and prosperity were only a few dozen words in history books. Who knew how much pain and despair were hidden in just a few dozen words? On the other hand, there was the rotten meat and wine and the drunken nobles. The money that the nobles squandered in a day could provide 100 families with enough food and clothing for the rest of their lives. The farmers, who worked hard for decades in silence, had to give most of their annual harvest to the landlords and the government. They had to do their best to maintain their food and clothing. When there was a natural disaster, they either had to sell their children or their whole family died in gullies. Did the heroes of the empire understand these things? Understood, they all knew in their hearts, and anyone with a conscience would admit that this difference in class was unfair and should not exist. But so what? The nobles were like jade, and the commoners were like mustard seeds. Such a saying not only described the difference in future fate and social status between the two, but also the difference in social wealth and power. When the lowly commoners didn't even have the courage and strength to resist, who would care about their rights and life and death? Those who wanted to plead for the people and change everything faced the resistance of the vested interest groups that controlled most of the world's wealth, voice, and violence. They could not only make you suffer and fail in every way, but also make you go down in history as the laughingstock of the world. And that wasn't the most despairing thing. The most despairing thing was that the supreme monarch, the sovereign of the empire that all the ministers swore loyalty to, was the most powerful leader of the vested interests. The heroes who were ambitious and wanted to change the world must have realized that. That was the moral dilemma that they faced. Since they cared about the people of the world, they must be loyal and capable ministers. If they were loyal, they would serve the country loyally. However, if they were capable ministers, they should have realized that the emperor was never honorable. Then, how should they choose? They couldn't choose and didn't know what to do. The emperor was clearly a lone man who seized the world's hard-earned wealth. The world was clearly full of injustice and evil, but the ministers who cared about the people couldn't do anything. The angry ones had already resigned and left. What were the people who stayed behind doing? Baoshirin was running. He could only escape. He could only pretend to turn a blind eye. He could only scrupulously abide by his duties and be a good governor. He could only stand up for the people who had suffered injustice and cried out in despair. He could only face the domineering nobles and arrogant princes. He could only use the law as a weapon to protect the last bit of dignity for the lowly people. But now, he couldn't turn a blind eye to it. He couldn't escape, because Wu Hui's angry roar resounded in his ears. His Majesty! His Majesty! The roars of the swordsmen of Mars were filled with fear, trembling, and desperation, like the people who were beating the drums crazily in front of the government office, kowtowing before him, and shouting themselves hoarse. The people were vulgar, the people were afraid of trouble, the people were afraid of officials, and the people didn't want to cause trouble. If they didn't have nowhere to go, who would be willing to bear the risk of revenge and come to the government office? Those people who were bullied by the tyrants and had nowhere else to go, just like Wu Hui now, treated himself as the governor of the capital city as their last hope of survival. They wailed, cried, and complained like a cuckoo crying blood. At that time, he was willing to uphold justice for every helpless soul. But now, the one who was suspected of murder was the emperor. Baoshirin, the unyielding and righteous governor. Was he going to accept this lawsuit? Baoshirin couldn't escape. He had been running away from certain fact, and he didn't want to face it. Which ambitious and hot-blooded official didn't want to be loyal to a wise monarch? But the reality was often unsatisfactory. A wise monarch was usually the same as a tyrant. The consequence of ruling the world was that the monarch would treat his subjects as chess pieces or even livestock. In order to maintain the majesty and power of the imperial power, the monarch would often play politics and balance in the court, and let the limited energy of the country be wasted in stupid internal strife and meaningless consumption. He just didn't want to face this. This was why he and Sun Lang had been quarreling. From before the war to after the war, the differences in their views couldn't be reconciled. Because the lawless Sun Lang had never been loyal and reverent, he could say those treacherous truths without any psychological pressure, those things that Baoshirin didn't want to agree with. But now he had no way out. He stood dumbly in place, his lips trembling. He couldn't say a single word. Faced with this desperate plea for help, he should have asked for the cause and effect, but he couldn't say a single word. But it didn't matter. Sun Lang had done everything for him. The Shinsei general's professional ability was even higher than the professional bailiff's. He calmly asked for all the details of the matter. His words were like sharp arrows that penetrated every hole. Baoshirin heard every word clearly and had no way to escape. "How do you feel?" Sun Lang's voice was calm and indifferent, but in Baoshirin's ears, it was filled with endless mockery. Baoshirin didn't say a word. Sun Lang then said, "Of course, you can forcefully explain that all of this was a scheme arranged by me. For example, I used methods that Wu Hui couldn't imagine to intimidate and frighten him. I also instigated him to falsely accuse the emperor and make false statements and accusations against you to drive a wedge between you and the emperor." Baoshirin slowly raised his head and glanced at Sun Lang. His eyes were calm like a dead spring, calm and without any fluctuations. He slowly said, "I'm not stupid." Sun Lang's expression was still calm. He repeated, "Then, how do you feel?" Baoshirin smiled bitterly. "It's terrible." Sun Lang glanced at the haggard Wu Hui standing to the side. He didn't fear him and said calmly, "There's something wrong with Wu Hui's imperial army. Previously, he almost died because the imperial army took control of his body. I don't need to say what this means, right? Baoshirin, do you know what your emperor is planning to do?" Sir Bao's heart was in chaos. The fortress he had built to escape had almost collapsed in an instant. Not only that, he had to face an even crueler truth in future. "There's not much time left for you, but it has nothing to do with me," Sun Lang said concisely and comprehensively. "I'll only ask you 2 questions. First, do you want to keep Wu Hui's life or not? If you nod, he can live. Second, the emperor wants to kill him, but can't. Today, there are many people in the Sword Palace. Everyone is an eyewitness. The emperor will know of Wu Hui's contact with me and will also know of your participation. In other words, given the emperor's personality, you will be placed at the top of his list of suspects. He was not stingy with his mocking words. So I feel very sad. You were ordered by the emperor to fight against me, a traitor. In the end, I, a traitor, expose your emperor's dark material and cause you to be placed on the emperor's list of suspects and silences. What's even funnier is that the emperor can't do anything to me, but he has a way to take your life. So, you, the imperial envoy, will face an even greater danger to your life. Ha ha! The muscles on Bao Shiren's face twitched violently. He clenched his fists. Sun Lang didn't care at all about the other's suppressed anger. He had flirted with many people and had never been beaten to death. The #1 martial artist in the world could do whatever he wanted. Thus, General Shansei continued to mock him. Rather than using your eyes to kill me, why don't you think about what you want to do? What do you mean by doing whatever you want? The emperor suspects you and doesn't even need evidence. He will kill you without hesitation. You've offended so many people these years. Do you want to have a taste of being attacked by a group? Wait, being attacked by a group. Wow, the classic gay is insulting me. He muttered a few terrible words that no one else could understand. He then continued, so what do you plan to do? Are you going to openly denounce and accuse the emperor in court? Or are you going to shrink your head and pretend you don't see him? Or are you going to seek refuge with the emperor in secret to protect your life? Bao Shiren gazed at Sun Lang and suddenly said, what do you want to say? Just say it. Just say it. Sun Lang said calmly, go find your master and ask him to come out of the mountain. Bao Haizi suddenly laughed coldly. This is your goal, isn't it? Sun Lang's expression didn't change. The emperor can control Wu Hui's imperial army to kill people. Is this the only case? To what extent can he do it? To be able to control Wu Hui's imperial army, then Zhang Hui, Li Hui, Wang Hui, who else can do it? How many imperial army members are registered? How many imperial army martial artists are registered? I'm not sure about the exact number, but I know that those who have the right to control the imperial army are all important court officials, high officials, grandmasters, and local legends. Anyone who has some achievements in the country's military and political system is qualified to be part of the imperial army. The power and prestige of this country are all built upon the imperial army. Do you know what I'm saying? He looked into Bao Shiren's eyes and said resolutely, if Wu Hui's case is common, and if the emperor has such plans, then one day, perhaps not too far away, he will completely control the fate of this country. It's because through the imperial army, everyone's lives are in his hands. He can eliminate those who disagree with him and fight those who agree with him. There are far too many things he can do. Do you think that this is normal? Do you think that the emperor's actions are appropriate? Do you think that this is the ideal relationship between a ruler and his subjects? The subjects entrust their lives and possessions to the ruler in exchange for great power. The price is to become the ruler's puppet and weapon. They have no right to refuse, no need to think. The slightest disobedience will cause their lives to vanish in an instant. Is it very interesting? So, he repeated his idea. Inform your master and have him prepare. Bao Shiren asked coldly, prepare for what? Sun Lang said, prepare to come out and clean up the situation because the emperor and I will beat this country to a pulp. If he's not willing to pick up the scraps, it's best that he stands on my side. Bao Shiren gritted his teeth and said, you're just doing this for your own revenge. Be more mature, old Bao. Sun Lang patted him on the shoulder and said in a very gentle tone, this world is not black and white. Even if we have different goals, we still have a common enemy. At the very least, I have no interest in controlling this country by controlling the imperial army. I don't love power, and I have no interest in it. Then he looked at Wu Hui and said, let's go back to the first question. What should we do with his life? I'll listen to you this time. If you want to keep him, I'll protect him. If you don't want to keep him, Then I'll use his life to appease the emperor and ease the relationship. Let's see if we can get any benefits from it. Wu Hui was already extremely terrified. Just now, he had been forced by Sun Lang to open his mouth and accuse the emperor. Not to mention that he had nothing left to lose. He was about to be smashed to pieces. Under these circumstances, whatever heroic spirit, whatever grandmaster's bearing, they were all thrown out of the window. They were all humans, and when humans were scared, they were all the same. He looked pitifully at Bao Shiren, his eyes full of pleading. Bao Shiren did not say anything. He knew what it meant to protect Wu Hui. Sun Lang did not give him a chance to be embarrassed. After waiting for 3 seconds, he grabbed the swordsman of Mars and said indifferently, "You must think that the emperor will not easily touch Wu Hui in order to avoid suspicion after his plan has been exposed. Huh, you underestimate me too much. I won't wait for the emperor to silence him. I'll drag Wu Hui into the palace and throw him in front of the emperor. I'll say that this old thing tried to assassinate me in the Sword Palace and was specially captured for the emperor to deal with. What do you think will happen? What will the emperor do?" Wu Hui's fluke that had just been born suddenly shattered. He cried out, "Master Bao! Master Bao!" Bao Shiren sighed deeply and said, "Please save his life." Sun Lang nodded and said, "That's fine. After all, this swordsman of Mars may know some secrets about Qi Lian Yin and the sacred sword of fire. He may even have more important information that he hasn't revealed. He is still of great intelligence value. Keeping him alive is still useful." He patted Wu Hui's shoulder hard. A sharp sword qi surged out and poured into the swordsman's body. Wu Hui's expression suddenly changed. He subconsciously wanted to mobilize his internal qi to fight back. But when he met Sun Lang's calm eyes, his body trembled and he gave up resistance. This sword qi can protect your heart meridian and prevent your heart from suddenly stopping like just now. When you fully mobilize your internal qi to resist the attacking enemy, this sword qi will also be activated to help you resist the enemy and buy you time. If you die, this sword qi will also mark the murderer and make it easier for me to avenge you. Sun Lang had always been very honest. Of course, the most important thing is that this is a loyalty insurance. As long as I want, your heart can explode at any time. Show me your loyalty and value. Mr. Wu, first of all, hand over the Mars Sword Palace to me in one piece. Wu Hui's expression changed several times. In the end, he slowly bowed and said, "Yes, Swordmaster." Bao Shiren witnessed all of this. His expression was very complicated. He couldn't stand Sun Lang's way of doing things. If he saw him on a normal day, he would definitely stop him and scold him. But now, he couldn't say anything. In the end, he just sighed and said, "You're not much better." Sun Lang smiled and said, "I like the word also." Chapter 983. Recently, Sun Lang had been the hottest topic of discussion. The nobles of the court kept his motives and actions a secret. Even the noble ladies and young ladies who usually did not care about court affairs knew that there was such a person who could pierce through the sky. Those tyrannical princes and young masters were also repeatedly ordered by their families to do as they pleased. They had been instilled with an insurmountable heavenly law by their elders. If you met a person who wore strange clothes, had short shaved hair, and was full of obscenities, don't think too much about it. Just run away. If you can't run away, just pretend to be a coward. In short, you were not allowed to have any conflict with him. After all, something had already happened. 2 days ago, Sun Lang's battle of public opinion had become a hot topic. Books were flying everywhere, and posters were everywhere, revealing a lot of secret information about Extraordinary 404. As a result, it attracted a lot of criticism from the royalists. The Red Generals under Sun Lang's command and the lackeys of the feudal conservative bureaucratic group fought a battle of wits and courage. In the end, General Shansei even personally took action and fought a few tough battles that made bystanders fall silent and the people involved cry. The specific process was like this. After the encounter on the street, the origin of the other party was interrogated. Then, they would go to their door and beat them up. Even the ancestors who were in seclusion would be dragged out and beaten up. In General Shint's words, it was, "I'm very clear about your step-by-step, straightforward, face-slapping routine, but in order to save each other's time, I'll have to clear the level quickly." This kind of street gangster-like revenge of, "if you trouble me, I'll beat your whole family," was like child's play, but it was inexplicably effective because it was simply too frightening for the people involved. Because no matter if it was a one-on-one or a group attack, whether it was a knife or a gun, whether it was a wandering or a desperate fight, no matter what kind of attack he faced, Sun Lang always maintained the 3 left punches, 3 right punches, 1 step after knocking down. No matter if the opponent was a famous martial arts master or a servant who had been practicing martial arts for several years, he would use a simple and crude combination of punches to smash the face. Along the way, anyone who saw him would be afraid. The several fights in the court had already shown General Shint's power and tactics. Now, he was showing the purest strength in a way that was almost child's play. Although the court was a game of power, this great country was built in the name of martial arts. In essence, there was still the shadow of using martial arts to break the law. Sun Lang was reminding all those who opposed him in this way, before completely destroying his body, it was best not to push him to the edge. He had to be reasonable, obedient, and respectful of order. He had to not cross the line. He had to not try to do anything irrational. He had to not set his sights on the people he cared about. He had to not break his shackles. Otherwise, he would solve everything once and for all with the first way of solving problems that humans discovered at the beginning of ancient times. This method of demonstration and intimidation seemed to be working. On the one hand, they were deterred by this guy's crazy logic and frightening martial arts. On the other hand, Sun Lang maintained the greatest calmness in the violent activities of the several solo raids and did not harm anyone's life. This way of doing things made the people involved and the bystanders aware of Sun Lang's goodwill. Sun Lang did not kill anyone from the beginning to the end. What did this mean? People usually had 2 thoughts. The first thought was, I understand. Sun Lang is also a coward. He doesn't dare to easily offend and doesn't dare to kill people. He's just SOSO. The second thought was, he maintains restraint and discretion. He won't easily break the rules because he has a big enemy. He has to let other irrelevant people know his position and attitude. He will carefully lock onto his target and will not casually affect others. He also doesn't want to provoke public anger. Most people were inclined to the second thought, because humans are creatures that seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. After seeing the exceptional power in the freewheeling martial arts realm, they were inclined to presume that Sun Lang was a kind person. Because humans are creatures that seek advantages and avoid disadvantages, and because their subconscious will avoid becoming enemies with this kind of monster. After all, everyone has a family and a job, and there are not many lunatics who are willing to court death. This was a kind of psychological suggestion, and it was very interesting, because this psychological suggestion could grow. When Sun Lang achieved more and more victories, obtained more and more advantages, and showed more and more strength, and gained a comprehensive advantage in terms of martial arts, power, status, and other aspects, this psychological suggestion rooted in many people's hearts would become more and more deeply ingrained. They would increasingly believe that Shunsei General Sun Lang was a great leader with strength, means, and self-control. Because these frightened people could not face the serious consequences of becoming enemies with such a terrible monster, they would rather deceive themselves, hypnotize themselves, and convince themselves. There were many, many such examples. People who were cheated to the point of bankruptcy but still believed in the direct selling model. People who were still calm before the butcher's knife came many, many people. Through this kind of human nature that seeks advantages and avoids disadvantages, Sun Lang had been instilling this kind of suggestion in the uneasy people's hearts. This country was never a monolithic block, and the human heart was the most elusive thing in the world. Judging from the results achieved so far, the task of overthrowing the emperor from the dragon throne was actually not very difficult. Because the second bomb had already exploded, Today, Sun Lang and Bao Shiren went to the Mars Sword Palace. Many people were paying close attention to the progress of the matter, and they were soon confused by the explosive news. Not long ago, the brilliant sword light of the sacred sword of fire soared into the sky from the Mars Sword Palace. The sacred sword returned to its position, and the palace gate opened. The red light was like a burning flame. Swordsmen in martial attire walked out of the 4 gates of the Sword Palace and went to the other 6 sword palaces, the Imperial Palace, the Sacred Artifact Directorate, the Martial Arts Hall, and the Imperial College to inform the important figures in the various departments of the Empire that the Mars Sword Master had returned. Everyone's first reaction after receiving the news was, wasn't Qi Lianyan dead? The second thought immediately roared, Mother Asterisk Kerr, it's Sun Lang. The third thought immediately roared, Mother Asterisk Kerr, why is Wu Hui so cowardly? But no matter what, it was a foregone conclusion. The 7 Luminaries' sacred sword was an important weapon of the Empire. The divine weapon had a spirit, and the one who could wield the sacred sword was the Sword Master of Destiny. This was common knowledge that the Empire used to hype up the deification of the Imperial Army. Now, it had benefited that bastard Sun Lang, because according to Sun Lang's script, the sacred sword of fire was a treasure that was bestowed to him by the late emperor in his dream in the Imperial Ancestral Temple. Whoever dared to deny it would be disloyal and unfilial. The legitimacy of him being in charge of the Imperial Army was indisputable. Now, the Mars Sword attendant, Wu Hui, had sent swordsmen everywhere to spread the news, completely nailing down this matter. Unless the late emperor descended to the world and said that he didn't do it, no one could deny the legitimacy of Sun Lang entering the Mars Sword Palace. Even the current emperor couldn't. The emperor must be so angry. Sun Lang smiled at Bao Shiren. Since a few months ago in Mingzhou, the emperor and I have never gained the upper hand in our open and secret struggles. Time after time, we've used schemes, but we've always lost more than we won. It's ugly and pitiful. For better or worse, he's a sovereign, a dignified emperor. Do you know why he's so frustrated? Bao Haizi's worldview was violently shaken, so he didn't have a good attitude towards Sun Lang. He said coldly, if you want to flatter yourself, you don't have to. Sun Lang pulled his belt up and said, No. Personal struggles and the course of history are both very important. The reason why I've won so many battles, other than my own talent, wisdom, character, popularity, and reputation, is also because the emperor is too stupid. He smiled playfully and said, Do you know why the emperor is so stupid? Bao Shiren said coldly, I've read in the history books that after a fierce and ruthless general won a battle, they would mostly praise their opponent, because if the opponent was too weak, the victory would be meaningless. Only by defeating a powerful enemy can one show one's strength and become famous. You should learn from them. Sun Lang clicked his tongue. So eccentric. What is this, Sundara? You've clearly recognized the bastard emperor and have the intention of drawing closer to my side. So why can't you be more frank? Why can't you bow your head and kowtow? Why can't you call me Big Brother? Bao Shiren scowled at him coldly. Sun Lang waved his hand and said, Fine, I'll say it directly. Why can the emperor govern the world? The world is so big and there are so many things to do. Even if he worked 24 hours a day and died of exhaustion 800 times, he still wouldn't be able to manage everything. How can he manage the world well? That's because he has ministers and helpers. The Minister of Revenue will tell him how to collect money and pay taxes. The Minister of War will tell him how to deal with military matters. All the prefectural magistrates and county magistrates are helping the emperor to extend the administrative system of the empire. As the emperor, he has too many helpers. Lord Bao's expression changed slightly. That's right. It's just as you think. When the Sky Demon comes, he has a large group of generals to help him fight and arrange military strategies. When a natural disaster comes, he has a large group of civil officials to help him come up with strategies and mobilize resources. The emperor doesn't need to be very talented. There will always be ministers who have their own strengths to help him solve his problems. Sun Lang's smile became even more brilliant. It was as if even his teeth were reflecting the dazzling light. However, when he played chess with me, he personally went into battle and fought one-on-one. As a result, he was beaten very badly by me every time. Every time I found his weakness, he was defeated many times and suffered countless losses. Despite being in such a sorry state, he still persisted in fighting one-on-one with me. Could it be that he never thought of finding a strategist to give him advice? Could it be that he doesn't know what to do? Could it be that he's a masochist? General Shunsei asked, Bao Haizi, you're smart and quick-witted. Tell me, why is this so? Bao Shiren coldly said, His Majesty has many secrets that he can't tell others. Sun Lang thought that Bao Haizi was going to mock and ridicule him again. He didn't expect him to say it so straightforwardly. Instead, he wasted a lot of the words that he had prepared. He nodded rather gloomily and said, I, Sun Lang, am a traitor. After returning to the court, I couldn't get along with the emperor. The royalists were filled with righteous indignation and couldn't wait to skin me alive. As long as the emperor gave the order, they would definitely be willing to serve him. But the emperor didn't give the order. In the emperor's united front, he only has 2 comrades. One of them is Empress Tensei. His daughter wants the throne and has done many things that she shouldn't do. As long as the emperor dangles the carrot of the crown prince in front of her, this woman will crawl like a little bitch, Sun Lang smiled. But this pair of father and daughter have other thoughts. The relationship between the two is strong and fragile. The emperor has another comrade, and this comrade is even more interesting, he said. In short, Empress and the other mysterious comrade are both very intelligent and resourceful. The latter is especially terrifying. Even if there are only 3 of them against me, it will be very difficult for me to deal with them. But so far, I've been winning. Why? In this alliance of only 3 people, there's also hypocrisy and concealment. In other words, not only does the emperor have to fight me alone, there's also the possibility that he will be held back by the other 2 comrades. How can he win in such a wretched state? Bao Shiren frowned and said, Who is the 3rd person you're talking about? Sun Lang smiled and said, I can't tell you now. Bao Haizi asked again, What does His Majesty want to do? What is it that he can't say? Sun Lang spread out his hands and said, No comment. Bao Shiren said angrily, Then why are you telling me this? Sun Lang smiled and put his arm around Bao Haizi's shoulder. He said very intimately, The emperor has ulterior motives and is doing bad things, so he doesn't dare to let anyone know. In contrast, I am open and above board. Who is righteous and who is evil, you can tell a glance. The emperor is alone, but I have to invite helpers. This is called a just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. I am telling you this because I want to tell you that our cause is just. Bao Shiren pushed him away and said coldly, You are also concealing something from me. How is this inviting helpers? How can you prove to me that this is just? If it is not just, why should I help you? Sun Lang said, I didn't tell you because it's a serious matter. Your young shoulders can't bear this cruel truth. If you want to know, it's very simple. Find your master, and I'll tell him. Bao Shiren sneered and said, Isn't it because you want to tie my master to your war chariot? Sun Lang said indifferently, Dealing with the emperor is such a simple matter. I do not need Wu Ho to help me. I invited your master to quickly calm the situation. As for me, my popularity in the court is at 2 extremes. Those who like me very much, and those who hate me very much. I am not someone who can convince the masses. Your master's prestige is enough. With him in charge, the country will be able to smoothly pass through any possible turmoil. Bao Shiren raised his eyebrows and said, You are so kind? Sun Lang said, I only hope that the people I care about can live in a stable country and can walk freely on the streets. I hope that they can live without worries, live happily, and receive the respect and admiration of the people around them, and not be secretly pointed at by others, saying that it was her man who destroyed everything in this country. He looked at Bao Shiren and said indifferently, Is this reason enough to convince you? Bao Shiren seemed to be taken aback. He was silent for a moment and said in a low voice, "Then what are you doing now?" Sun Lang was startled at first, and then he remembered the sword that Bai Yue had stabbed him in the great desolate mountain, and also the apology of the old man Bai before he turned into starlight and scattered in all directions in the Bai castle. Maybe sometimes he could be a little confused, maybe sometimes he could be a little hypocritical. Maybe he did not need to be so persistent, so stubborn, so angry. Maybe the two things could be merged into one. Maybe revenge did not need to be stained with the color of blood. No matter what, as long as the result was good. He smiled and said, "Through revenge, I will save the world." Chapter 984. That's right. Heal my senior sister's injuries first. Wu Hui, bring me your Sword Palace's roster and secret manuals. I want to see them. I said, did you hear me? My senior sister's injuries. You, Lord D, Lord Song, please go to the Sword Palace's library and find something. Don't pretend to be deaf. Did you hear me? My senior sister's injuries. Do you have any idea how the Emperor will deal with this? In the main hall of the Sword Palace, facing Sun Lang, who was trying to avoid the topic, Bao Shiren raised his voice. You want me to help you? You want me to ask my master to come out of the mountain? Why are you unwilling to help? Do you have any prejudices against her? Or is there something you can't say? Sun Lang glared at him. Nonsense. I'm fighting for the greater good of the world and the country. Pulling you up the mountain? No. Convincing you to join the organization is also a choice made based on the belief of justice. The two of us are called comrades, not allies, because we are gathered together for a great ambition. You just joined the organization, but you want this and that. You don't have any dedication at all, Bao Shiren said impatiently. I can't be bothered to talk to you about this. There's only one thing. My senior sister is suffering from the everlasting spring technique. I'm afraid only you can save her. His tone softened a little, and he said seriously, Senior sister is quick-witted and intelligent. She knows everything about medicine and astrology. She knows everything about astronomy and geography. She even knows how to disguise herself and use hidden weapons. She also knows how to use Qin Gong to hide her tracks. She is the best in the world. If you heal her injuries, she will definitely help you with all her strength. She will definitely be a great help to you. I am sure of this. We are from the same sect, Lord Bao said firmly. Senior sister is definitely the kind of person who will repay a drop of water with a gushing spring. Sun Lang said in a subtle tone, Yes, I have seen her repay a gushing spring. It is very realistic. Bachelor Bao obviously didn't understand the profound meaning behind his words. He only said, In that case, please help. Sun Lang waved his hand and said, I told you before to ask your master to come and beg me. Bao Shiren was obviously unwilling. Firstly, he respected his master and didn't want to see his master pleading in front of Sun Lang. Secondly, he also cherished the affection between fellow disciples of the same sect and hoped that his senior martial sister would be able to escape from the sea of suffering as soon as possible and not drag things out and add more variables. It was just treating an injury. What was the big deal? Although he was an honest man, he was no fool. After pondering for a moment, he came up with a plan. After thinking for a while, he thought that the capital governor had a kind expression on his face. He lowered his voice and said mysteriously, That's not right. That's not right. You should think of it this way. You asked me to ask Master to come out of seclusion to discuss important matters with him. However, Master has already lived in seclusion and doesn't care about politics. If you want him to conspire with a traitor like you, I'm afraid it won't be that easy. In this kind of situation, if you treat senior sister first with this favor, there will be something to talk about. After all, Master loves senior sister the most. After senior sister got into trouble, it was Master who took care of her treatment. Senior sister's injuries didn't get better, and Master also blamed himself. Lord Bao tried his best to make his expression look even more cunning. He looked like a dog-headed strategist who came up with a bad idea. So, if you treat him first, Master will have to consider your suggestion carefully because of this favor. Sun Lang looked at him from the corner of his eyes and clicked his tongue. Black Bao, you are not honest either. Lord Bao felt a little embarrassed, but this matter was related to senior sister's injuries, so he could only thicken his skin and laugh dryly. But Sun Lang's heart was clear. Bao Shiren's words were not valid. Treating a disciple's injuries was only a personal favor, but conspire with a traitor was a matter of integrity. What kind of person was Marquis Wu? How could he not distinguish between public and private matters? If that old man was not willing, not to mention treating Conan, even if he saved his entire family, he wouldn't be moved. But if Marquis Zhuge was stubborn, then Black Bao could bully him. Sun Lang suddenly asked, "If you save your senior sister, you will immediately ask your master to come out of seclusion?" Bao Shiren hesitated for a moment, then nodded his head. "All right, but I am just a disciple. Whether or not I can ask my master, I am not sure. I can only promise you, I will do my best." And he gritted his teeth and said, "You are asking my master to come out of seclusion in the name of the country's righteousness. Since that is the case, you have to provide a strong argument and evidence to prove that the country is in danger, so there's a need to ask my master to come out. Do you understand what I mean?" Sun Lang nodded his head and said, "To be able to say this, it means that you are not half-heartedly scolding me. I understand." He thought for a moment, then added, "You want me to treat your senior sister's injuries. Just talking to me is useless. It still depends on whether your senior sister is willing or not." Bao Shiren was puzzled. "Why is senior sister not willing?" Sun Lang said with a face of righteousness, "How the fuck would I know? Women are super troublesome. Anyway, you can talk to her about it. If she is not willing, then don't bother me. This young man will take care of her for 3 days. Remember, 3 days is the limit. If she does not come to register for treatment in 3 days, you still have to ask your master." Bao Shiren thought for a moment, then slowly nodded his head. He could only agree. After all, if Kunin did not want to be treated, then it could not be blamed on Sun Lang. Sun Lang looked at Lord Bao and sneered in his heart, "Treat? Treat my ass. Kunin wants to eat me alive right now. How would she dare to dehydrate me again? She even wants me to treat her injuries and recover her body. What kind of joke is this? When I touch her, she will cry out, not to mention her body growing back after losing so much water. It is already not bad if she doesn't become smaller. But, speaking of which, even a little girl of that level would be affected." Sun Lang sighed, feeling a little disappointed. In fact, he had no idea how old the minimum age of the Great Health Preservation Force was. As a man with a big sister complex, as a non-Lalakan, he strictly adhered to his bottom line as a man and his human conscience, and did not do such a crazy experiment at all. He was simply a human's conscience, the benchmark of a good man, and the embodiment of integrity. He was wallowing in self-pity, completely throwing Kun Nan's matter to the back of his mind. Treating her injuries did not exist. He would never treat her injuries in this lifetime. How could Kun Nan agree to such a thing? How could she go easy on him after suffering such a big loss? Bao Shiren received a positive answer, and was afraid that Sun Lang would go back on his word. So he immediately rushed to find senior sister and tell her the good news, but was stopped by Sun Lang. "Are you stupid?" Sun Lang ridiculed. "Do you know how many people outside are watching here? Your every action can solve many people's doubts, including the Emperor's. That old man has failed again. He must be anxious and angry. You, the Imperial envoy in charge of the investigation, running out at this time, what are you doing?" Bao Shiren thought about it, and thought that this was true, but he quickly thought of a good idea. "I can ask someone in the Sword Palace to send a letter." Sun Lang. Sir Bao saw his conflicted expression and asked, "What is it?" Sun Lang rolled his eyes and said, "What is the F*** point of this? Why do you have to make her come here? Why do you have to write such a letter? Can't you tell her yourself when you go back?" Bao Shiren was momentarily speechless. He thought of senior sister's strange behavior the day before yesterday at the Shenfu, as well as Sun Lang and her strange interaction and behavior. He felt that something was not right. Thus, he hoped that senior sister could personally come and confirm some things. If there were misunderstandings, differences could be resolved, and difficulties could be explained face to face. The other party's gaze, which he thought was hidden, could not be hidden from her. However, Zhang Zhao did not care about this. She turned and walked into the magistrate's office. She went to the backyard as if there was no one around, and then went to the back door through a small path. Her target was the Shun residence. Miska had gone there. The beautiful cat girl changed into a thick cloak to cover her conspicuous ears and tail, and quietly came to the Shun residence. Cat people were natural spies. They were elegant, fast, and silent. In the Greenwood country, there were many cat people serving in the army as assassins and scouts. She did not alert anyone and quietly sneaked into the Shun residence. Lord Bao said that Miss Ku was in the Shun residence, so she must have gone to visit Miss Shun Yaohua. When Zhang Zhao thought of this, she had already locked onto Shun Yaohua's embroidery building. Miss Ku's boudoir was naturally different from other buildings, and it was easy to find. Her figure was like a low-key and invisible wind, quietly passing through the Shun residence. It was a task without any challenge, and it was just to deliver a letter. Cat people were lazy by nature. Zhang Zhao was very diligent and responsible, but she still felt unhappy. Since Lord Bao knew that Miss Ku was in the Shun residence, why did he not let the messenger come here directly, but instead send a letter to the capital office and let her secretly go there? It was really unreasonable. But since Lord Bao had given the order, she could only follow it. But in the end, Lord Bao only asked her to deliver the letter. He did not say how to deliver it. If she sneaked in quietly, no one would be able to find out. Should she play a trick on Miss Ku and Miss Shin? After all, she had to come here and miss the cool morning sun. It was very comfortable to bask in the sun before. Thinking of this, Zhang Zhao's heart was already restless. She quietly rushed to the back of the embroidery building and jumped onto the roof. Her flexible and soft body hung down from the eaves and slowly reached out to the window. With a soft sound, the window was pushed open. It was pushed open from the inside. Kunan and Zhang Zhao looked at each other. Kunan stared for a while, and then recognized Zhang Zhao, who was hanging upside down. "It's you." These words reflected a problem. That was, Kunan had already noticed her approach. Zhang Zhao's cat ears suddenly stood up, and she felt that her professionalism was being challenged. She said in an incredulous tone, "Impossible. How did you find out?" Kunan scratched her head and said, "Actually, it's not me. Forget it. Let's not talk about it. What's the matter?" Zhang Zhao remembered her mission. She took out the letter and handed it to Shenning. She was still thinking about how her stealth had been seen through. She could not help but ask, "How did you find me?" Kunan opened the letter and wanted to answer casually, but the next moment her eyes widened. The little girl's pretty face quickly turned red. She was embarrassed, angry, mad, and irritable. All kinds of emotions were fiercely changing in her eyes. Kunan exploded in an instant. "Nothing. Shame. Of traitors." This voice was full of hatred and resentment. Zhang Zhao, who was caught off guard, was shocked and jumped to the side with a meow. Kunan's mind was in a mess. The complex emotions in her heart could not be described with words. It was Junior Bao's letter. Junior Bao said that Sun Lang was willing to treat her injuries. A few days ago, she had been molested by Sun Lang's lewd stick here. After being molested, she realized that her body had grown a little. Kunan still remembered what happened a few days ago. Even her body still had the lingering effect of the earth-shattering tsunami. Thinking about it now, she could not help but clench her thighs. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was, how did Sun Lang know? Obviously, this was a big misunderstanding. After being molested by Sun Lang, her body had grown a little. Sun Lang said that he was willing to treat her injuries. Such a scene appeared in Kunan's mind. Sun Lang, that bastard, revealed a lewd smile at her, waving his handkerchief like a brothel keeper, and winked at her. "Beauty, come on." You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.